seats. We're going to be starting in a moment. Those that are non-voters, please sit in these stands to my left. In the last two sections of the stands on my left, non-voters. And voters, when you come up to speak at the microphone, can you bring your voter card with you, please? I'd like to ask you all to please stand and face the flag behind me on my left. And please join with me in a pledge to Old Glory. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. We have the pleasure tonight of the members of the Timberlane Regional High School Concert Choir and chamber singers who are going to lead us in the national anthem. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
May all be seated, and again, non-voters, please sit on my far left in the last two sections of the bleachers. As we open tonight's deliberative session, I'd like to ask the members of the school board and the budget committee members to please introduce themselves. And we can start right here on my immediate left.
Jennifer Silva Atkinson.
Brian Boyle Atkinson.
Susan Sherman Plastow, Chair of the Board.
Jim O'Shaughnessy, attorney for the district.
Earl Metzler, Superintendent of Schools.
Jeff Dowd, District CFO, Business Administrator.
Lee Doobie, Sandown.
Sarah Markmer Plastow.
Kristen Savage, Plastow.
Kim Farrar, Danville.
Sheila Lowe's, Sandown.
Sean O'Neill, Danville. Michael Mascola, Blastow.
David Gerns, Plastow.
Phil Sherwood, Atkinson.
Peter Belo, Plastow.
Todd McCormick, Danville.
Julie Hammond, Atkinson.
John Hughes, Danville.
Thank you. And for those up here on the podium, I was asked to remind you to please speak into your mics, and you can pull them closer. If we get feedback, they'll tell us, but it's also being televised and recorded, so just watch where your mic is. Thank you. Next, I'd like to read the moderator meeting rules. These are the rules that this august body has been using for a number of years. Number 1, no smoking. Please turn off your cell phones or set them on vibrate. Each person will treat every other participant with courtesy and respect. Any voter who wishes to address the meeting will approach the microphone. You can see the microphone in front of me. Be recognized by the moderator and then state your name and your town. Give your address if you'd like, and spell your last name. This is very important for speaking and also for making motions in seconds. I'm advised that the clerk must list the maker and the second of all motions, your name in the record. So when you do come up to make a motion of a first and a second, please repeat your name so the clerk can have that in the record. General comments are limited to 5 minutes maximum. Speakers shall remain at the microphone for any answers to their questions. All questions to the school board, budget committee, or any other officials or meeting participants will be directed to the moderator. Each voter who desires to speak on an article will be given a chance to do so before any other voter is given a second opportunity to speak on the same issue. Makers of motions and seconds, please state your name for the clerk. One amendment will be allowed on the floor at one time. No amendment to an amendment will be allowed. Such proposals will be dealt with as subsequent to the First Amendment after it's been voted on. Amendments must be in writing and signed by the voter along with their printed name. I've already been advised there may be some amendments, so it has to be in writing, sign, and print your name. That has to be submitted when you make the motion. Motions must be made in the affirmative, no negative motions. Secret ballots must be requested by 5 voters in writing and signed by the voters, verified by the clerk, and made before the vote on an article, and those 5 voters in writing have to be in the room at the time. Challenges to any voice vote require 7 or more voters immediately after it's announced, who may then request a written ballot. The Municipal Budget Act has a 10% limit. If we need to explain that, it will be explained by the school board chair or our school district attorney if necessary. Discussions on both sides of a motion will be allowed before a call to question will be accepted by the moderator. A 2/3 vote is required for a call of the question. Any amendment of financial amounts must be stated in dollars. Percentage figures must be converted to dollar amounts. Upon appeal of any ruling by myself, the moderator, a majority vote will prevail. Robert's Rules of Order are only as a guide today. At any time during the meeting, these rules may be altered by a majority vote of those eligible to vote at this meeting. If I don't hear any objection from the floor, we will adopt these as our standing rules for the conduct of this meeting, subject to change by you, the voters. Any objections? Hearing no objections, I'd now like to move to one item. I believe there's a list of non-voters that will be presented by Sue Sherman and seconded, and then we'll take a vote as to you, the voters, allowing these non-voters to be able to speak at tonight's meeting. Mrs. Sherman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to make the motion to allow the following non-residents to speak or make presentations at our deliberative session this evening. Dr. Earl Metzler, Superintendent of Schools. Dr. Roxanne Wilson, Assistant Superintendent of Schools. Jeffrey Dowd, CFO, Business Administrator. Attorney Jim O'Shaughnessy, District Legal Counsel. Susan Rassico, Director of Special Education and Student Services. Christy Michaud, Executive Director of Data, Assessment, and Accountability. Sandra Allaire, Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Michelle Ozier, Principal of the Pollard School. Jennifer Marino, Principal, TLC at Sandown Central. Megan Wilson, the Assistant Principal at Danville Elementary. Michael Flynn, the Principal at Timberlane Regional Middle School. Angelo Fantasia, Director of Athletics. Tony DiBartolomeo, Director of Music. Barry Chuligan, Director of Guidance. Ryan Richmond, Timberlane Teachers Association Teachers Union President. And Greg Jones, Professional Engineer from Dennis Myers Architects.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
And your name for the
Brian
clerk?
Boyle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? The ayes have it. Those parties will be allowed to speak if they wish when the time comes. Next, I'd like to turn to the warrant articles. To the inhabitants of the school district of the towns of Atkinson, Danville, Plastow, and Sandown, New Hampshire, qualified to vote in district affairs. First session of annual meeting deliberative. You are hereby notified to meet at the Timberlane High School, 36 Greeno Road, Plastow, New Hampshire, on Thursday, the 7th day of February, 2019 at 7 p.m. The session shall consist of explanation, discussion, and debate of warrant articles number 2 through 13. Warrant articles may be amended subject to the following limitations. A, warrant articles whose wording is prescribed by law shall not be amended. B, warrant articles that are amended shall be placed on the official ballot for a final vote on the main motion as amended. And C, no warrant articles shall be amended to eliminate the subject matter of the article. The second voting session of the annual meeting voting warrant articles 1 through 13 will be conducted by official ballot to be held in conjunction with town meeting voting to be held on Tuesday, the 12th day of March, 2019 at the town election polls in Atkinson, Danville, Plastow, and Sandown, New Hampshire. Atkinson, voting will be conducted at the Atkinson Community Center from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Danville, voting will be conducted at the Danville Community Center from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Plastow, voting will be conducted at Pollard School from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sandown, voting will be conducted at the Sandown Town Hall from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Article 1 is the election of officers to choose those who are eligible for election this year. Article 1 is non-amendable and non-debatable, so as was announced, we will move on to Article 2. Article 2, the operating budget. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth on the budget, posted with the warrant, or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $71,681,333. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $70,930,105, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Timberlane Regional School District or by law. Or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:, Roman numeral X and then XVI, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Note, warrant Article 2, the operating budget, does not include appropriations proposed under any other warrant article. A majority vote is required at the polls. This article is recommended by the school board 8-1-0, recommended by the budget committee 10-0-0. Do I have a motion to place this article on the ballot as written?
I'll make a motion to place it on the ballot as written.
That should be Kim.
I'll second that.
And we have a second. Open for discussion. I believe that the Budget Committee and other committee members will present this article. So who would like to speak first?
We're just going to continue reading down this line? Yeah. So my name is Michael Mascola, Chair of the Budget Committee. So I'm going to go through some of the process and some of the information. Some of this might be repetitive. We went through some of these slides over at the public hearing, but I think it would be useful to go through them again in a summary. So, David, can you take over the budget process page?
Yes, David Garnes here. The budget process, the budget was developed in accordance with the applicable New Hampshire statutes, specifically RSAs 32, 33, and 195. The incorporation of the budget committee mission statement is that the budget committee will develop a fiscally sound annual budget that will optimally meet the needs of the district by working with district personnel and in consultation with the school board. Throughout the budget process, the budget committee will take into consideration district taxpayers as well as support for staff, rigor, evaluation, and accountability initiatives that drive student achievement. So the process is that we followed was to review the actual expenditures in prior years, consideration of staffing and enrollment projections, deliberation of capital improvements requested within the capital improvement plan, collaboration with administrators, department heads, teachers, and many others.
Thank you. The next, I just want to talk about the budget overview. Phil, would you mind taking that one?
Sure. Budget overview, the 2018-19 budget, $71,870,606. The 2018-19 proposed budget stands at $71,681,333. That's a net change of negative $189,273. That's a negative change of 0.26.
Thank you. The next one we have is budget drivers. Todd, would you mind taking this one? And by the way, these are budget drivers greater than 25,000.
Sure. Budget drivers, major budget increases over 25,000. Student transportation, 421,958. Fund transfers, 257,500. Benefits, 231,000. Professional services, 144,904. Repair and maintenance, 118,332. Supplies, 56,370. You want me to do the major decreases as well?
Please.
Major budget decreases are greater than 25,000. Tuition down 26,112. Travel workshops down 27,168. Official admin services down 52,367. Books, info, resources, and software down 80,255. Bond principal and interest down 84,000. Site and building projects down 100,001. Utilities, energy down 113,519. And salaries are down 981,815.
Thank you. Next, we have budget code, budget by object code. So we use a, I think it's an 11-digit number to describe all of our lines in our budget. This one's broken up by object code. Alan, if you can take this one, but what I'm going to do differently right now is I'm only looking for the summary. We don't need to read through every single line like we did at the public hearing.
So it's a summary of what?
Just the very bottom line subtotal.
Okay. Subtotal salaries and benefits, $52,791,789, less of $700,815 for 2018. So I'm just going to go to the subtotal again on this.
Hold on, Alan, can you get the mic there, and then we'll just repeat the whole thing, please?
Subtotals and salaries and benefits for 2019-2020 proposed, $52,791,789. Down from 750, difference from 2018-19, difference $715,815. And the budget code for the budget code, so what is the total expenses? Total subtotal expenses is 71, for 2019-2020 is $71,681,333,000. Difference from 2018-2019, a less negative $189,273. Fall budget.
Did everybody able to hear that okay? Okay. Those are the major areas that we presented at the public hearing for our proposed budget. So back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. So you've heard the explanation of the budget. Your handouts also on the budget showed you how the default budget was calculated. Does any further discussion on the article? If you wish to speak on the article, come to the mic and give us your name.
Jack Sapia, 5 Crystal Hill Road, Atkinson, New Hampshire. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Budget Committee for all their hard work. I'd also like to thank the administrators like Kathy Belcher, Tom Geary, Jeffrey Dowd, and so many more that work tirelessly and sometimes unfairly subjected to behavior that is beneath this district. So thank you, folks. You guys did a great job. The Budget Committee worked hard, and although I did not agree with some of the minor details, they developed a responsible budget in a good faith effort. They worked collaboratively with staff and administration to fulfill their obligations to provide, to the best of their ability, an effective budget that provides a safe, healthy learning experience. The Budget Committee followed a process, I repeat, a process, to develop a budget based on data, the analysis of that data, and hard work, not a gut feeling. You guys did a nice job, and thank you very much. I would like, however, to discuss the $200,000 reduction at the end of your process. The school board, in my opinion, weaponized the default budget by creating a false narrative for the purpose of driving and controlling the Budget Committee's hard work. They suggested meeting after meeting that the budget will not pass if there was a gap between the proposed budget and the default budget. I find it quite revealing that the premise was always that the Budget Committee, the Budget Committee had to move to the default budget, their number to the default budget number. And then the gap widened because there was an additional $1 million reduction of the default budget. Budgets are based on needs developed by data, and on facts presented to the Budget Committee. The default, for lack of a better term, is a fail-safe that if the budget doesn't pass, a formula is provided by law in the budget if the budget fails, and I don't believe that that process was followed. The evidence is clear. The default budget was based on a prior default budget. What we saw was multiple one-time expenses taken out. If done correctly, there should have been no one-time expenses in the prior budget. During an untelevised workshop, Dr. Farrar suggested that the data suggests that any time a default budget and proposed budget were more than 10% apart, that voters would always vote the default. That's not their job. In the same meeting, then she went on to say, and I have a feeling, I repeat, a feeling, that there's a $1 million of fluff in the default, but I just can't find it. Fast forward, the board took $1 million out of the default, and let's look at just one line of what they took out, the capital line. In a meeting, Dr. Farrar was taking $500,000 out of she thinks, the capital line. Mr. Dowd, our business manager, asked, how do we explain that to DRA? Kim said, as a one-time expense, I think. Dowd says, what happens if something goes wrong if we have no money to fix it in the capital line? The response was, if we do have to go to the default budget, we will move money back into the capital line. My question is, if that capital line was a one-time expense, we can't move money back into it because by the formula, it can't be in there. But they just, okay, so I did that. Now, Mr. Boyle walked into the Budget Committee, misrepresented what the vote was by the school board, and asked them to reduce the budget by $500,000. And when challenged, we hear it's a bottom line budget, that the details really don't matter. But it does matter. It matters to the student in the middle school that water is pouring on his head because the roof leaks, or the track star that has no track meet, has no home track for this year. To the Budget Committee, you took $200,000 out. Have confidence in the work that you did. Mr. Gurn said it best. We put a lot of hard work into this. We developed this budget based on facts and feedback from the staff and administration. And most importantly, have confidence in the voters. Have confidence in the voters that they know that a well-developed budget will be supported by the entire community. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on this article?
Hi, my name's Kevin Contos, Kontos. I live in Sandown. I've been following the budget process since moving here about 3 years ago, and one thing that I've noticed seems to be a common theme is that the flow of information between SAU and the requesting party is not what it should be, in my opinion. Things also often take a long time, often requiring multiple requests, and even it gets as far as an RTK being filed. One item that had been being waited on by the school board to the tune of 4 months plus is the salary report summary. And once it finally did come back, it had a total amount of $31,799,715. This number included unfilled positions. If you back out those unfilled positions, you come to a number of $30,782,213. Currently, the operating budget for that line item includes $34,085,221. This is a difference of $3,308,008. If we look at the difference, that includes no unfilled positions. My concern with this error is twofold. One being that $3.3 million is the taxpayer's money. It should stay with the taxpayer. After all, a school district should only be asking taxpayers for what they need to function. While I'm also considering the well-being of the kids, the $3.3 million is far too large to overlook. Secondly, as is currently presented to the taxpayer, we as a district are running the very real risk of ending up with a default again this year. And to be quite honest, the default is at a level in my eyes, but the default's at that level, but in my eyes, that's up to the school board to take whether they take issue with that extra money in this line item because they have a similar item, amount in there. Not only will we, in my eyes, end up with the default again this year, we also run the risk of having warrant article number 5, the Articles of Agreement, getting rejected by the voter, along with any other warrant article that has the verbiage raise and appropriate attached to it. It's my belief that adjusting this line item is also in the best interest of the faculty as it enables warrant article number 5, which is the Articles of Agreement, a chance to actually pass the voter. It's my belief, as I said, as is currently being presented to the voters, we'll be walking into the voter booth and voting no's straight down in a line to anything with a tax impact. We also need to make sure that the faculty and their Articles of Agreement are not caught in the middle of a contentious budget battle. Because of these concerns, I'd like to put forth a motion to reduce the operating budget in the amount of $3,303,008 to reflect a total operating budget of $68,373,325 that reflects the SAU 55's own salary line item total.
Do you have that in writing and signed?
Yes, I do.
Would you like to present it? Thank you. So we have a motion made to reduce the operating budget in the amount of $3,303,008 to reflect a total operating budget of $68,373,325. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Can you give us your name, please? Did you get that? We're getting old. We can't hear that well. Can you speak up or come to the mic? The clerk didn't hear you.
Leon Artis Atkinson.
Thank you, Leon. So we have a motion made and seconded. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. We'll start with Sue Sherman.
Just a point of correction to the speaker. He mentioned Article 5 having to do with the Articles of Agreement. I think you meant that's the teacher's contract, not the Articles of Agreement. Is that what you meant? Thank you.
Kim?
To the motioner's point, I would like somebody from either the Budget Committee or the SAU to speak to the discrepancy between the salary line item detail and what's in the proposed budget.
Would someone like to do that?
If I may, Mr. Harp, thank you. The report, I believe, that you're looking at, you had mentioned that there was a mistake in that report, and that the budget was not in line with the actual salaries. Request had been made by the school board, for a budget report with actual positions. current positions. Budget and actual are two different things. Our reports have budget numbers and we have actual numbers. So the budget was provided. The budget was rolled forward from the previous year because we're in a default budget year. The report on which I believe you're basing the number of 31 million was a report for actual current positions that we're paying. That doesn't include, which are included in the budget report. Again, we're looking at an actual report, actual positions that we're paying. Does not include track changes, longevity, in some cases certifications, enrichment, stipends, extra hours, overtime, our entire substitute pool, teaching assistant subs, janitorial and custodial subs, other stipends for athletics, for music. In some cases, we have things that are budgeted, for example, private music lessons that we're reimbursed revenue for when those services are provided. Track changes, and in the event that some of our employees leave after a period of time, there's an option to pay out any time that's owed to them. So those are all factors that are in the budget, but are not in a current position report because they aren't positions. We have a lot of substitutes that work for us, for example. They aren't in positions, but those funds are still allocated for those positions in the budget. The report that you were looking at were actual positions, current positions. The budget contains a lot more in the salary lines than just positions. I believe the report even noted at the top, positions only, no supplementals.
Hope that answers your question. On the motion to amend.
Jack Sapia Atkinson. I think everyone in the room wants to get it right. I don't think anyone's proposed or wants to soak the district. I don't think anyone wants to short sell the kids. So my question to probably the superintendent is what kind of effect would a $3 million deduction have on how we provide services to the children?
Dr. Metzner.
Well, this is certainly an interesting question that is something that would be worked out with the school board in the event that that was the operating budget. There are obvious places that you look at. You look at class size and you have to look at programs. I'm not quite sure how devastating, although $3 million, $3.3 million certainly would have a major negative impact on this district. I think the budget committee did a great job coming back with what I believe was a real conservative, flat budget. It's actually even lower than a flat budget. Bottom line number, I think, is something that we could operate and maintain our current programs and staffing levels. I think a reduction of that size would be very difficult to fit into the operating budget without reducing programs and staff. But again, that would be something I'd have to work out with the school district. So it's with the school board, it's a little premature to be able to identify exactly what a $3.3 million cut would look like.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Yes, Peter.
I'd like to ask Mr. Dowd that when you provided that report to the school board, did you explain those shortfalls in it?
The report noted at the top, it was, I believe, either salaries or positions only, no supplementals. Simply what was asked for. I don't believe there was discussion on the report. I'm certainly happy to have that discussion.
On the amendment. I'll go here and then I'll go at the end. Go ahead.
Rob Collins from Danville. I just want to say the basis for this motion, from what I understand, is based on information that Mr. O'Neill provided that is not correct. It was something that he posted online.
According to your interpretation.
According to the interpretation of the business administrator.
And I'll address that right after you.
There isn't $3 million lying around in salary lines that isn't being used. He just explained all that. a lot of things are in the larger number that are not in the report that was provided by the school or to the school board, including the major one is all of the money that pays for the salaries of the substitutes. It's a lot of money, and it's not in the report that you received. So people voting on this should understand that the basis for this is not correct, and it was posted by a school board member, unfortunately.
Gentleman at the end.
Sean O'Neill, Danville. This report was asked by this board early in September, and it took us up until, what, late December to get this? Actually, January. January 11th, I stand corrected. This report, as illustrated, showed that our current salary, which the directive of the board was to generate what is appropriate for this line item in the default, the line number. Mr. Dowd, just from his testimony here, has just said that that includes substitute, it doesn't include substitute teachers. We've asked for salary line item details. What is the current payroll of Timberlane, and what teachers and staff are getting salary, and that's what's going to hit that line in a budget season. And once again, we had multiple reports, none of them were ever correct, and as we found out tonight that that apparently has some errors in it, which is, you know, we're starting to get used to this kind of situation here on this board. And to come back and give us this data and tell us that it's wrong, it's constantly wrong, folks, all the time. So that any report that we've gotten out from this administration for salary line items details is inaccurate by those being presented. How many times do we have to ask for this stuff? We pay top dollar for this service, and we get subpar service all the time. And I personally am getting tired of it.
I believe he's done
I
speaking.
release
Is there anyone
the
else to
microphone
speak?
back to the Mr. Moderator.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to speak to the gentleman who made the amendment, just quickly looking, just so you're aware. Don't quote me on the number, please. It was just a quick look, but the substitute lines in there are about $358,000. And so there, you know, those other things that were listed, but I just wanted to let you know that was what I quickly added up that maybe you didn't have.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Sarah Mockemer. I'd just like to impress upon our attendees this evening the importance of the work that our budget committee did to develop this budget. They worked very, very closely with the business administrator, with the administrators and teachers to propose and create a budget that was responsible. As was said earlier, it's actually lower than last year. This line, this kind of a cut will inevitably hit our students and our teachers and our programs in a way that I don't think anyone can really truly anticipate. It is very important that we trust our budget committee, the people we have voted into their seats to create our budget that is going to support what our students and our teachers and our programs need. A cut of this size is very concerning, and I fear for what the end result will be come spring if it passes.
Dr. Metzner?
And just to follow that up, in terms of, you know, what got us to this point in terms of staffing levels, right? Because we're talking about the staffing line. I think people should know, first of all, last spring, the board asked me or directed me to reorganize the administrative staff, which we did, and we realized some savings there. The board reduced a certain number of positions, and to Mr. Contos's point, yes, we do have some open positions, but they're currently they're advertised and we're recruiting. They're in some areas which are very difficult to fill, and so sometimes those are being filled right now by temporary service. It could be somebody that we're paying on a daily rate. You know, they're specialists in some positions that are hard to fill. I think there's about 16 positions that are advertised that we're currently trying to fill. So we came back with a real conservative staffing level when we opened the school, and I was very clear with the school board last year, especially in the area of special ed. we wouldn't really know, we're going to do the best we can and try to do this with less staff, what that would mean into December and January. And those are some discussions that we're having now as we're feeling some of the pressure in some certain program areas. But the positions are not just left open to jack up the salary line. Some of those positions are very difficult to fill. You could have like a feeding and swallowing specialist. You could have an occupational therapist. There are certain positions that, although we advertise and try to fill, we have a very hard time finding qualified candidates. Some math positions at times, maybe some science positions, language positions. But that's really why there are some open positions that are, if you looked on the web, they are advertised. We're actively recruiting and trying to find people to fill those roles. So that's really what brought us to this staffing condition where there are some open positions in the actual in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Metzner. And I will remind those both on the podium and in the audience that we're trying to treat each other with respect. Comments about falsities and fraudulent things is not really called for. And if we can just keep to the topic in the article or the amendment, we can still get all of your comments and remarks presented. So do I have anybody else that would like to speak on the amendment? The amendment is to reduce the bottom line of the operating budget, $3,303,008. Anyone else to speak on the amendment? I don't hear anybody or see anybody at the mic. Those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. Well, I think it's clear the noes have it. Kevin, can you give the motion to the clerk so she can add it to the record? Moving on. Any more discussion on the article? On the main article? Yes, ma'am?
Mr. Moderator, Louise Pajak, Sandown. Do we need to restrict reconsideration on the amendment, or is it moot?
After I finish the article, then yes, you can move to restrict reconsideration. So I don't see any more people speaking on the, yes, Peter.
I'd like to speak on this vote we just passed. I'd like to make a amendment to the operating budget. I would like to increase the legal fees by $50,000 in light of what's been happening in our district in the last 60 days.
I'm going to second that motion.
So your motion is to increase the line item or increase the net of the amount by $50,000.
Yes, I would like to increase the, so I should write up
the bottom line. You need to write that up, sign your name, print your name. I believe Kim seconded that motion. Is that correct,
It'll be
Kim?
line 2318.
Do you need the account code?
No. On the operating budget, your motion is to increase the bottom line, not a particular line item. So you just need the amount of the increase, $50,000. While you're writing that up, do you care to say anything more on that? And then we'll see Jack.
Well, since as I'm completing my second year on the school board, things have come to light as people. First of all, you've got new changes in the laws this year where people have standing, and they did not have standing last year. So there's going to be more legal action. I used to pride myself in my prior life as a selectman and to stay out of court and try to limit legal expenses. And I'm sorry to tell you that we have not been able to do that. There's been defendants in a few of these things. And these are all legit concerns of people who raise things. So as a cost of doing business from this point forward, there's going to be more legal reviews, legal actions. And this is the type of thing that either the budget committee or the school board dealt with, and I just think it's a good idea for the district to be better prepared legally.
Thank you.
I was kind of hoping we could use money like that to put a picture of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln in every classroom. But what is that $60,000 based on? Is there a per hour, or do you anticipate being in court so many times? I'm not trying to be coy here. It just, if you need more, raise it more if you, what is that based on?
First, let me look at the motion, Jack, because I thought he said 50, but.
I'm sorry.
Would you like to
apologize.
raise
50.
it?
I thought you said 60.
Did he say 60?
50?
50. It's
Yeah, I'm
50.
just wondering if there's a basis, and I'm not trying to be,
Yeah, I believe we're represented by different firms for different matters, and I think the billing rates range from, I think, $275 to probably $350 an hour. So it's just general legal line.
and I would agree with you, Brian, that, I would hope that litigation can be avoided at all costs. And, it's unfortunate that that's we're turning into Washington a little bit. And hopefully everyone learns to sit down at a table. So
Well, ladies and gentlemen,
hopefully you don't have to use it.
We're your defendants. We have not been the plaintiff.
So we have a motion made and seconded to increase the budget line item, the total budget, by $50,000. The explanation was it was for legals, but simply this to increase the bottom line by $50,000. Any more discussion on that item? Yes, ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Corinne Martin of Plastown, New Hampshire. Maya Angelou said, "When you know better, you do better." Plato said, "Nobody is more hated than he who speaks the truth." George Orwell said, "In times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." We need to come together, address our budget, and TRSD's financial relationship with SAU 55. I'm speaking tonight concerning budget issues that ultimately impact us all, and to remind people that community awareness is essential. They say it takes a village, right? Many are invested here, raising children, working.
Ma'am, can I interrupt you? Are you speaking to his
Yes,
$50,000?
absolutely.
For the legal?
I have 5 minutes, correct?
If you speak to the amendment.
Yes, it is to that. Bear with me, please. Sorry, I lost my place. Raising children, working, offering countless hours volunteering, and years serving on various committees and programs. We care. Sometimes citizens raise concerns, but many problems are saved for behind closed doors. This occasionally leaves residents or staff feeling frustrated with a lack of support, communication, resolution, timely handling, or addressing concerns appropriately at the SAU level. It is clear that our district needs to be able to handle issues with administrative complaints, the use of legal, and money in the form of your taxes, our budget, and everyone's time. We need a proactive instead of reactive business leadership model. We have issues in district where private students and/or staff information is released, and then legal is utilized to incur expenses to intimidate citizens who recognize the error of an employee SAU social security number and home address being released. In society, we were taught to keep quiet, to keep secrets, to be nice and respectful. Now we say, see something, say something. I see something, and now I'm gonna SAU something. There are at least 6 situations that I am aware of where cease and desists and no trespass letters have been sent to citizens living in SAU 55 districts. This is district time, effort, and money. It's divisive and can be an infringement on citizens' civil rights to the point where the ACLU got involved in 2018, advocating for one of our own community members, offering an added legal expense for the district. When I found out that someone else received letters just like I had just months prior, and that there are others, no, just no. I am not the first, but I will push to be the last in this toxic trend by shining light into these dark places of legal fiscal irresponsibility. Our students, parents, and teachers deserve better. We can put that money to better use, supporting local school administration and teachers. I urge you, stand up for each other to ensure that no family needs to deal with what some of our local families in our own communities have endured, unnecessarily increasing district expenditures and legal lines. Rifts occur over utilization of resources and handling of issues, ultimately increasing our expenses. We're better than this. We need accountability, transparency, and a serious look at what is important versus where our time and budgeted money is going. I called out to citizens to communicate issues that needed to be addressed. This part may not be available to them. We should not utilize legal resources in lieu of parent meetings. If you are a taxpayer, you collectively contributed $3,000 plus in legal resources to one parent situation instead of one parent meeting. One parent has gotten emails from Drummond Woodsum attorneys and more. We can do better. We should be open, proactive, and receptive rather than reactive, snowballing into an avalanche that negatively impacts our legal line and budget. Let's stand up, unite, and address situations so family and friends are united, not divided. I hope we can all work together to prevent more legal fees and tears. We need to stand up and put a stop to this legal bloating in the budget and bullying our parents and give back to our teachers. We need to bully-proof our families and the strapped taxpayers who still want the best for the children without the adult fiscal or irresponsibility. We need better management of what we have and to put what we have where it's needed. I'll stop for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more discussion on the amendment? On the amendment. Seeing no one at the mic and no further discussion, we're going to vote on the amendment. The amendment is to increase the bottom line of the proposed budget by $50,000. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion fails. Puts us back to the main motion, the original warrant article. Any further discussion on the original warrant article? I see no one at the mic and no further discussion, so the original warrant article will go to the ballot as written. Someone wanted to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to reconstruct reconsideration.
Second.
I have a motion to restrict reconsideration and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? The ayes have it. Moving on. Article 3. Kevin, can you hand this? Thanks. Capital Reserve Fund. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District raise and appropriate up to $250,000 to be placed in the school building construction, reconstruction, capital improvement, and land purchase capital reserve fund, established in 1996, with such amount to be transferred from those funds in the June 30, 2019 unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1 of this year, which were apportioned as capital expenses in 2018-2019 in accordance with Article 6 of the Timberlane Regional School District Articles of Agreement. No amount to be raised by taxation. A majority vote is required at the polls. Recommended by the School Committee, 9-0-0. Recommended by the Budget Committee, 10-0-0. Do I have a motion to place this on the ballot as written?
I'll make that motion, Brian Boyle Atkinson.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Sue Sherman Plasto.
And Mrs. Sherman, I believe you're going to speak on this article?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is the Capital Reserve Fund that we established a number of years ago. It's a way to put money away for those kind of capital expenditures. You'll see as we go through the warrant, there are a couple that would be perhaps tapping that reserve fund at this point. I think it's a good way to plan for those kinds of events instead of it being a huge, large sum in a warrant article for an item. So.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I see Jack coming.
Barbara Kishka, Plastow. I was just wondering how much is in the current Capital Reserve Fund balance?
Jeff, do you?
Yes, about $1,400,000 available.
1.4 million?
Yep. The answer is 1.4 million if you didn't hear.
I stand in favor of this article. I wish we could put in more, but without knowing some of the details. We need to start funding general maintenance year over year over year, and this is a good way when you run into a big project like the middle school roof, for instance. I think the number on that was $1 million, somewhere between $750,000 and $1 million. It will offset the impact to the taxpayers on the annual on their taxes. So, with our facilities and our infrastructure in the condition that they're in, this could not be funded enough. I'd love to be able to put another $50,000 on that, but I don't think the environment is such. But if the floor is willing, that'd be a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sapia. Any further discussion on this article? One more time, any further discussion? I don't see any hands. So Article 3, Capital Reserve Fund, will appear on the ballot as written.
Motion to restrict reconsideration, Mr. Moderator.
I have a motion to restrict reconsideration. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Boyle. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstains, the ayes have it. Moving on, Article 4, Performing Arts Center outer wall replacement. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District raise and appropriate the sum of $500,000 to repair the outside wall of the Timberlane Performing Arts Center, and to authorize the district to withdraw the sum of $500,000 from the existing school building construction, reconstruction, capital improvements, and land purchase capital reserve fund. No amount to be raised by taxation. A majority vote is required at the ballot, at the polls. Recommended by the school board, 9-0-0. Recommended by the budget committee, 10-0-0. Do I have a motion to place this article on the ballot as written?
I'll make that motion. Brian Boyle Atkinson.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, David Gurns, Glasgow.
Thank you, Mr. Gurns. I believe Mr. Gary and Mr. Jones are to present.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. With me tonight, I have Craig Jones, architect from Dennis Myers Architectural Firm, who the school board voted to hire to help us with design services and specifying materials for this important project. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Craig, who's put together some slides. For anybody interested, there was a one-page handout kind of going over material selection and just some basic information. So, Craig. Trying to click here to
It's
the...
supposed to work, the click one. Is that your click?
Took it from me. Make sure the light.
The computer is below my podium, but I don't know if that helps.
Do you want me to take it back?
Switch on the side.
I got the on button.
Next slide will
Just tell
work.
me, just coming next.
There you go.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. We're honored as Dennis Myers, the architects, to be able to be involved here. So there are two parts to this project in where we started. First, we do an assessment, and then we do a conceptual proposal on what would be the final solution to correct what the existing conditions are. So if you can look at the slides have red arrows at points where there has been failures. There are failures on the cement board siding. So it's not the entire building envelope, it is only the cement board siding. And we've seen this all over the state, all over the area, where the cement board siding has failed because of cracking. It's usually its attachment to the substructure underneath. So some of the failures you can see here are where in the top left corner there are two arrows indicating where water will come down the face of the building, and at a flashing point the water is making its way up into the siding. The lower picture shows the failure of that siding as it blows out, basically the siding, and then the water will make it back into the building, causing further damage. On the right picture, it's kind of hard to tell, but there are cracks. The building panels can fail entirely, and we try to correct those before it's a capital expense like this is. It's, initially, you want to try and catch some of this as a maintenance item. Some of that work has been done on the south side of the building where the sun hits it the most. Siding has been replaced over time. The maintenance crew has been able to take care of some of those corrective measures by installing metal flashings and even vinyl siding as a replacement to the cement board siding. Anybody with a home knows that the vinyl siding can be very brittle. So around the front of the Performing Arts Center, there are fascia and soffit details where water is getting in and causing paint failures. Once there's a paint failure, the water will get in and ruin the substrate as well. So these are just the areas on the soffit. In the new proposal, as you drive up to the building, you notice that it's in really good shape at the front. None of these places where there are masonry or metal siding currently, or the storefront, the aluminum and glazed systems, none of the failures have occurred there. So the building over its life and performance have performed well in those locations. It's just the remainder of the building. It's the upper parapet, upper walls that need to have replacement, and that would be replaced with a metal siding. We'll go to the next slide here. On the front and most of the back, we want to have a metal siding that, first of all, at the base is very durable. We would use a corrugated material you can see in the upper right. And then above that, we can go with a colored metal siding that has a little bit more flare, and it's in an orangey brick color in variated colors, so that it emulates or goes with the brick on the front of the building. So these are the products, and if you have any further questions, you can ask them of us. I would just point you to the handout that we're looking at more durable materials. We're looking at more of an aesthetic appeal on the back of the I guess we call it the back of the building, and also a compatible system with the current rain screen system, because if we can replace the siding at this point, let's say it's 1% of what the entire building is worth. If it gets into the wall, if there's further water that penetrates into the wall system, you're looking at more of 12% of the total building cost to have to replace the entire wall system once it would get beyond this siding.
Thank you. I have a question. Is there a useful life that you can simulate and connect with this $500,000?
Absolutely. So the product is these products are warranted at 30-year for the product. The finish is closer to a 40-year. As you can tell, the existing building where there's metal siding, which is a similar product that we're going to put on, we're seeing that is a 40 to 50-year, as opposed to what the cement board siding didn't last near that long. And cement board siding has a maintenance issue. You have to keep up on the paint.
Thank you. Does anyone? Yes, Mike?
My question's for Tom. Yes. And I know we've had this conversation in the past, so maybe you can just make it as more of a statement. But so when I asked in the past, we spent money on the pack up front, 19 years ago roughly. So what kind of assurance do the voters have? And this gentleman just mentioned the warranty on the materials, and I don't want to go into the details of any contracts, but are there any caveats that we don't know about? Like, is the manufacturer of the product going to point to the installer, and the installer is going to point this way? What assurance do the voters have that once the money is spent, the pack is fixed, that we have great coverage for the product to last? And if it doesn't, we have a path to get it recorrected?
Sure, that's a great question. I think the process that we're following is the way we want to do it. Hiring an architect to make sure that we're following manufacturer specifications is going to help us have a warranty that's honored. Also, between myself and Dennis Meyer's architecture managing the project, we'll make sure that they conform to all the project specifications so that warranty's honored. So, I hope that gives you some general assurance.
It wasn't so much for me, but I just want everybody else to hear it. So thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions for these two speakers before they sit down? Any other questions? Here, no other questions for those two speakers. Thank you for speaking. Mr. Sapia, you.
Atkinson, New Hampshire. Thank you. First of all, I'm a fourth-generation bricklayer. My father was a mason contractor. I was a mason contractor. I had over 100 bricklayers working for me. And as you notice, the masonry held up pretty good. I watched the meeting, the last meeting, when you guys discussed this, and I saw some of you agonizing over this. Sean, you brought up a great point, right? Why aren't we doing this all masonry?
Could you repeat that again, Jack?
I said, Sean, do you want a hug? Sean brought up a good point. He could say, why didn't we do this all in masonry? Or why can't we? And I think the engineering alone, because you'd have to take all the sheathing off, put up relieving irons. If the structural steel is all in the right place, there are just too many caveats with going, but you're going along the right lines. And with the strategic plan and all of that coming up, I want people to recognize tonight that fiscal expediency on the front end usually ends up costing you on the back end. I remember when this material, we've been chasing that material all around the complex. My family sat there and said, this stuff isn't going to stand the test of time. And sure enough, in New England, it didn't. So I did take a look at the manufacturer's website. They've been around since 1965. That means these guys are good. They're good at what they do. But I do have a few concerns, being in the industry for as long as I have. Most of what they show you are from buildings down south. But this is a $500,000 commitment. I think we just need to make sure that we're doing the right thing. The first thing that came to mind while I was watching this is the noise factor. I don't know if anyone's ever been in a metal, we have an acoustical building. If you've ever been in a metal building when it's raining out or freezing rain, it sounds like you're in a pan of hot oil with a bunch of popcorn kernels going off, right? So what is the noise factor? I've given him the list. The second one is rehab, to Mr. Mascola's point. Typically when you're doing rehab work, you end up somewhere on a staging with the engineer, the architect, the general contractor, and the manufacturer, and everyone's pointing a finger at each other saying, it's not my responsibility. I've experienced that a number of times. So it would be my recommendation to get the manufacturer's rep out here to look at the existing details and sign off on it. Weather. What's been proposed are to put on this material horizontally. If you go to their website, I would love to have this put on vertically because of the weather, so it doesn't hold the weather. The problem with that is then you'd probably have to put the strapping on in the other direction. But there was, I believe it was Goose Bay High School, where they did it at a 45. They put it on at a 45-degree angle, which kind of, gets the water to migrate in the direction you want it to, and so it doesn't freeze. It looks very attractive, and I think you may be able to get around the strapping detail. The other problem with putting this material on horizontally is if there's any imperfection in those existing walls and the strapping over a long span, especially when you put indirect lighting on it, you're going to see the wind in that wall. And I believe, and I'm counting on the architect here to shed light on this, that with the fastening system detail, that there's absolutely no room for variation on that. So is there a way to, for lack of a better term, shim it so you have nice straight lines? And then in the presentation last week, you talked about wood and metal contracting at different rates. Is that strapping wood, and would we have those same types of issues? Let's see. The other thing is, have we looked at any other options? For instance, this has a 30-year life expectancy, and eventually the wind and the weather's going to get to it. If you put up something like concrete, like we have up at the Atkinson Library, you can come in 20 years from now and paint it. I don't think there's anything you can do to restore the metal once it's up. That's what you have, and in 30 years, you may have to replace it. Would that make more sense? And has anyone actually been to a building where this is up? Has anyone actually seen the material? And have they talked to the owners of the buildings? And the last thing I would say, and this is kind of like an offer to the Budget Committee and to the school board, as you know, I'm passionate about athletics. And I'm just wondering, would it be possible to do half the building, in other words, allocate $250,000 until some of these questions get answered, they may all be answered tonight, and then appropriate...
Jackie, time's up. So can we let these gentlemen answer your 90 questions first?
And then I can come back in, sure.
Yeah.
No, we're done.
I'll try and answer as many of those as I can. A lot of these are finite construction details. We have looked at the details. I'll go to the materials first. We did look at some other materials. If we want to stay on the low end in terms of cost, cement board siding today has improved over time, but I don't think there's an appetite in this community or for this building to put the same siding back on that has already failed. And it's a maintenance issue, so you're going to have to maintain a cement board siding, whereas you wouldn't with metal siding or with masonry. Now, and to masonry, that was another one we looked at. The budget item for that was about 3 times more. Yeah, I know. And originally, the building was designed apparently to take a masonry skin all the way around it.
That's correct.
But that was cut at that time for budget reasons, and so here we are back at this stage. In terms of acoustics on the building, there are a number of performing arts centers that have this. In fact, the design idea came from one. So I did look into that further to make sure that we didn't have a problem. First of all, it's on the siding, so you'd have to get a driving, freezing rain, which we get infrequently, but it has an exterior insulation, and then there's a metal backup with another acoustic insulation within that. So, you know, we feel confident that with the separation with the wood as the attachment to rigid insulation to interior insulation, that the acoustics are not compromised. Let me look. So we looked at a lot of the details. Changing the aesthetics to go to a 45, I suppose there's a potential. Right. and we looked at it I looked at it personally as a vertical application, but we'd have to redo 100% of the strapping, which I think our line item for that was about $25,000 adding strapping, so we stuck with the horizontal strapping for cost measures, but it works better for this building. It's fairly tall. Going with a multicolored kind of striation that takes out any of the imperfections of metal is going to move, and it's going to move so that you might get a little bit of variation, basically because the sun's going to hit it different. That's when you're going to notice that the variation in colors really helps with that. And also, these come with a clip system so that it's going to slide. So if the wood is going to move relative, or the metal is going to move relative to the wood base that it's connected to, it has essentially a slip joint. And we rarely do that, but we can do that in a concealed system where we're hiding the fasteners behind.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Comment?
Yeah, I'd like to call the
Mr. Boyer?
question.
I just want to let the audience know that the board did receive a full presentation on that. Thank you very much, Tom and the architect. And this is a pretty important article. This is one of our key buildings, the PAC, and we're looking to protect it. There's been a problem at the PAC now for years, and I think it's wise to pass this article. And can I make a motion to this article right now to increase it?
I'm going to give Jack like 10 seconds.
Yeah, I'm only going to take 10 seconds. I just wanted to thank the architect, and these are questions you ask on the front end, so we don't have, I was in no way, shape, or form, you did a good job.
Thank you.
The only other thing is that I thought maybe we could move this article, and it would only be with the support of the board and the committee, $250,000 to do half the PAC, and then allocate the rest of the balance of that money and support the track, so we could get both things done, get the kids back out on the track, and then come in the following year and finish the rest of the building. I don't know if there's an appetite for that or not, but it was something I thought of, a way of getting as much bang for the buck this year.
So hearing no other discussion and no more questions of these gentlemen, and having no motions to amend, then Article 4...
I'm looking to amend this.
You want to amend
I want to amend this. I want to increase this article by $31,000 to cover the required bonding and contingency, which will also help address Mr. Muscola, plus what the school board's concerns were, to make sure that we have a long-term fix here. Because when we received this detailed presentation about a month ago, it was nicely broken down, by different types of material, different grades, and when we were asking Tom and the architect to make sure that the district's covered, it was quite apparent that we should spend a little more money and ensure that
Mr. Boyle, can you make a motion? We'll get it seconded, then you can speak on it.
Make a motion to increase this budget, to increase this article by $31,000, so the new total will read $531,000.
Second.
How should I go?
So now you may speak on it.
So now I'm 90% done here. So, any rate, I think it's, the 500 was put in by the school board initially as a placeholder, knowing that Tom would come to see us within 4 to 6 weeks and to update with numbers. So now that we have a little more accurate numbers, we're closer as we are here this evening, it was quite apparent to the board that we should amend this article up to increase bonding and have some sort of contingency fee.
So we have a motion duly made and seconded to increase the article by $31,000 by deleting the $500,000, replacing it with $531,000. Any more discussion on the amendment?
My question, I guess, is for the school board. Did we not have bonding in the 500,000?
Not real. The 500, Mike, was just a round number, holding number. That was not a hard number.
Oh, okay.
On the amendment.
Barbara Kishka, so pardon my ignorance, but when I think of bonding, I think of something where you're borrowing money over time. What do we mean by bonding here?
A performance bond and surety bond. So it's basically when people are doing this type of public work, quite frankly, I thought they all had it. They all are bondable, but I guess it depends what your bid specs are. And if you, depending on who the city, town, or state is, sometimes the bonding might be provided by the customer. This particular case, we want to make sure that the proper bonds and sureties are in place there. And by the way, this is going to be out to bid. This is just a,
Mrs. Sherman?
Yeah, I was going to speak to that this would go out to bid, but I think $531,000 would give us a chance not to have to do what happened originally where they had to make cuts. I don't want to do that and miss something we should have covered. This is a perfect example of the capital reserve fund. This is what we've been putting money away for so that we could use that money for this type of a project.
Sean, did you have something?
Yes, to expand on Brian's comment to this young lady over here, with regards to a performance bond, what it does is ensure that the recipient that it's awarded this contract actually fulfills the contract. For example, if they were to go bankrupt in the middle of the project, they had scaffolding here and nobody else showed on up, and we've already paid them some schedules and so forth. What we would do then as a board, we would execute the clauses of that performance bond, and all that funds would come back into the school district so that we could hire another firm to do the project. So it's to ensure that the project is done and complete.
Thank you, Sean. Any other discussion on the amendment? On the amendment. Seeing no one at the mic, no further discussion. We'll take a vote. All in favor of the amendment to increase the bottom line to $531,000, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstains. The ayes have it. Now on the motion as amended. Any further discussion on the motion as amended? Hearing none, seeing no one at the mic, Article 4 as amended will appear on the ballot as amended.
Restrict reconsideration, Mr. Moderator.
We have a motion to reconstrict reconsideration, seconded by Mr. Boyle. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstained. The ayes have it. Moving on. Article 5, 3-year collective bargaining agreement, Timberlane Teachers Association. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Timberlane Teachers Association and the Timberlane Regional School Board, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels over the amount paid in the prior fiscal year. Fiscal year 2019 to 2020, estimated increase $866,343. Fiscal year 20 to 21, estimated increase $851,967. Fiscal year 21-22, estimated increase $901,897 for a three-year total of $2,620,207. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $866,343 for the 19-20 fiscal year. Such sum represents the additional cost attributable to increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over that which would have been paid at the current staffing levels. The majority vote is required at the ballot, recommended by the school board 900, recommended by the budget committee 10-0-0. I just bring to your attention that this is a collective bargaining agreement and the cost items cannot be amended. Do I have a motion to put this on the ballot as written?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Sarah. Do I have a second?
I second.
That Sheila?
Yes.
Way down there. Hey, Sheila. Yes. Made and seconded. I believe, Sarah, you're going to speak on this article?
Yes.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you. So the intent of this article will allow the school district to enter into a successor three-year contract with the Timberlane Teachers Association. The proposed contract ratified by the union and the school board represents a 3.07% increase in salaries for year one, a 2.92% increase in salaries in year two, and a 3.02% increase in salaries in year three. So a summary of some of the changes that were made within the salary schedule. In year 2019-2020, there was a 0% increase on all of the steps. In 2020 to 2021, there was a 0.75% increase on the step schedule. And between 2021 and 22, there was a 1% increase on the step schedule. There was a change in the longevity payment. In year one, members that completed 15 years of service, the longevity payment increases from $100 per year to $150. In year two, there's no change. That longevity payment stays at $150 per year. And in year three, members that have completed 15 years of service, the longevity payment increases from $150 per year to $175. Salaries, other salary schedule changes. In year one, 2019 to 2020, there is a 0% added to the step schedule. Current step one and new members without experience will be placed on the current step 3 in the schedule. Current members advance one step and advance a second step midway through the year on February 1st with a max step 15. No additional steps are added to the salary schedule. In year 2, 2020 to 2021, there's that 0.75% added to the step salary schedule. Current members will advance one step with a max step 15. No additional steps added to the salary schedule. In year 3, 2021 to 22, a 1% increase is added to each step in the salary schedule. Current members advance one step with a max step 15 and no additional steps added to the schedule. Additional changes to the agreement will now include part-time members, clarifies that only members working more than 50% are entitled to benefits. Language updates were made to the maternity leave policy and the reduction in force process, and added language for just cause to the discipline grievance process with the exclusion of non-renewals and termination.
Any further discussion on this warrant article? Seeing none and seeing no one at the mic? Oh, somebody's coming.
Did everybody see those slides? I'm sorry. I apologize to all the teachers. I didn't mean to fail so miserably on that slide flipping. Does anybody need me to go back through them? You all good?
Good job. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Laurie Hirschenroder.
Herchenroder. I am a resident of Plastow, New Hampshire, and president of the Timberlane Support Staff Union. I am also a very proud parent of one current student and 2 alumni of Timberlane Regional High School. I am fortunate to work as a kindergarten educational assistant at Pollard School. I have the honor of working alongside some of the most dedicated, hardworking educators our district is blessed to have. I am here tonight in unity with Timberlane Teachers Association in support of voting yes on their new contract, warrant article number 5. They say it takes a village to raise a child. I confidently attest to all of you, we have one incredible village watching out for our children. Thank you, Timberlane educators. Day in and day out, our students are nurtured, supported, encouraged, protected, taught. Today, tomorrow, and always, Timberlane educators make a difference. It's what we do. Timberlane educators know students are our future and go above and beyond to ensure students succeed. I stood before you last budget season and asked you, our school board and budget committee, to please know the impact of the decisions that you make. I ask you again, and all registered voters of our district, to please consider the impact of the votes that you will cast on March 12th. Our votes impact our future, our students. They depend upon us all. Please vote yes for a sound budget. Vote yes for our Timberlane Teachers Association's new contract, warrant Article 5. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan Richmond, RICHMAN, President of the Timberlane Teachers Association. Good evening. I'd like to start by thanking the members of the school board negotiations team and the TTA negotiations team for a productive negotiations cycle. The collective bargaining agreement before the voters represents the mutual efforts of both sides to respect the work the professionals of the district do for our community, while also being fiscally respectful of the taxpayers. This agreement brings Timberlane back to the starting line after years of being paralyzed and is a step forward to Timberlane to, once again, be competitive with other districts. This groundbreaking agreement will also bring a new level of respect and professionalism to the district. This agreement is for the high school social studies teacher who spent her own money for winter gear for a student whose family was financially struggling. It is for the middle school math teacher who makes sure that no child that enters her classroom leaves hungry. It is for the elementary special education teacher who writes a kind note to every one of her students each week so they never feel forgotten. This agreement is for the professionals of this district who sacrifice day in and out, ignoring the noise and the politics, even when they are thrown into the middle of it, because the education and care of the children of the Timberlane community are their primary concern. Last year, we were humbled by the outpouring of support for the faculty and staff of Timberlane during a very difficult budget cycle. Now, we ask the community to continue that support and vote yes on 5 for purpose, progress, and pride in the Timberlane community. Thank you.
Any further discussion on Article 5?
Mr. Herb,
Peter?
where can we see a copy of this proposed contract? Is it on the website?
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
I think his answer was yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, yes.
Sean?
Yeah, one of the points that I like to make out of this is, and I do support this article, is not just the monetary aspect that was probably 9/10 of the discussion that Sarah went on over, but the last and final point that she had mentioned is that the teachers have expanded rights under this collective bargaining agreement. That is very key, and I think it goes to the leadership of the 2 people that were added to that. And I'd like to commend Dr. Farah and Brian Boyle, who spearheaded that effort to make sure that our teachers are protected from undue influence and are properly treated fairly, to be blunt. And I want to really thank the both of them that they saw that this was in there. That was a sticking point for them. So thank you on both of them.
Any further discussion on Article 5?
Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
I'd like to also thank the chairman of that Personnel Committee, Sarah McAmer, for her work.
Thank you, Sue.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Corinne Martin, Plastow, New Hampshire. I believe that competitive teacher salaries and contracts are needed in order to ensure employee retention and satisfaction, rather than any student or teacher feeling the need to vie for the position and any other media involvement, fiscal management and allocation of resources. I strongly believe that we should vote yes on this and show respect to the teachers and not just towards the top end of the salary lines.
Thank you. Any further discussion? See no one at the mic, no hands raised. So Article 5 will appear on the ballot as written.
Mr. Moderator, motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 5.
A motion to reconstruct.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Boyle. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed nay. Abstained. The ayes have it. Moving on, Article 6, authorization for special meeting on cost items. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District, if Article 5 is defeated, authorize the Timberlane Regional School Board to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 5 cost items only. Majority vote is required at the polls, recommended by the school board 900. This is a warrant article, wording prescribed by law. Again, like the cost items, it's non-amendable. Do I have a motion to place this article on the ballot as written?
I'll make that motion.
It's from Sarah. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Sheila. Any discussion? No discussion needed. Article 6 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 7, charges for professional banking or brokerage assistant for reserve funds and trust funds, non-contingent. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District vote pursuant to RSA 35:9-A, Roman numeral 3, which became effective July 26, 2014, to authorize the trustees of the trust funds, without further action of the school district meeting, to charge any expenses incurred for professional banking or brokerage assistance for trust funds and reserve funds in their custody, as authorized by RSA Chapter 35 and RSA 198:20, small c, Roman numeral 2, against the funds involved. Such authority to remain in effect until rescinded by a vote of the school district meeting, which vote to rescind such authority shall not occur within 5 years of the adoption of this article. A majority vote is required at the ballot, recommended by the school board 900, recommended by the budget committee 1000. Do I have a motion to place this on the ballot as written?
So made.
Thank you, Sean. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Lee. Discussion. Sean, are you going to discuss this article?
Yeah, what this article is doing is allowing the trustee of the trust funds, who is currently Danville, that oversees the trust funds for the Timberlane Regional School District. What this will do is give the trustees the ability to seek professional fund management that would pay for that service from the proceeds of the actual investment instruments that they undertake. So both parties actually have the best interest of our tax dollars to get the highest return available. Previously, and what currently is available to the trustees for options is very limited. They used to have New Hampshire Deposit Investment Pool, which was administered by the state. That return was dismal at best, to say the least. What this would do is allow us, the trustees, to look at other avenues for this. And the 5-year part at the end of this is just so that if the voters decide to undo this to abolish this warrant article at a future, you don't want to have to do, to undo the instruments to walk this back to what we have currently right now. So that would be why the 5-year portion of this warrant article is actually in place.
Further discussion on the article as written.
Barbara Kishka, Plasto. So is there any chance that our funds will lose capital under this?
No.
All right, and so for most things like index funds or just straight interest, this looks like a blank check to me. It says any fund, and what is the cap? Is there any cap?
The cap would be whatever is under the authority of the trustee of the trust funds. Currently, they have all the scholarships, which are dictated by the trust themselves. They oversee all this, so that it gets deposited into an instrument, a financial instrument. This is what would allow the trustees to go to other avenues besides just a simple government bond, for example, that they could buy. They could buy other instruments that are of like risk, because, I mean, I'm going to be blunt here, that isn't like they're going to go on out and buy, some internet stock, for example. It's a high-risk instrument, and then at that point, you would be risking the capital investment that you put in there. There's very specific guidelines by state what the risk they can do. What this would do is allow another firm to help manage this besides the trustees themselves, and to pay for this out of the actual proceeds that they get.
But the problem I'm having with this is there's no max. All these other things say this is how much money this is going to cost us. There is no indication how much money this is going to cost us.
If they got, for example, 10% interest, I'd be glad to give them 2% of that. I mean, they make more money if we make more money in interest. So we are on the mutual, we both benefit. The more that they can get for us for interest, the more that we benefit. If they happen to have a down year and a down economy, our cost would be less to them.
Someone here wish to answer the question? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. You had asked, could this result in the Capital Reserve Fund losing in capital?
Yes.
So my question is, are you talking about an investment that would cause it to operate at we'd lose money on, not the fee itself, right?
Correct. So I have two questions. One is, can we lose capital, and what is a reasonable maximum cap?
And Sean, did you indicate that you couldn't, that this wouldn't result in losing capital? It could, couldn't it?
Maybe Kim can answer that question.
I think that it could. Just as a little understanding of the trustee of trust funds. The trustee of trust funds are elected by the town. Danville right now holds all the school trust funds. Most of them are relatively small, well under $20,000. The only large one right now is the Capital Reserve Fund for the buildings, which is $1.4 million. Right now, without this in place, you're pretty much limited to investing this in the New Hampshire DIP, which is a very, very low interest rate on $1.4 million. So this will open it up for a more professional money manager. Yeah, I don't know who exactly they would choose, but there might be some small possibility that you could, but right now you're so limited that you're not even getting what's even a great interest rate for this, or trustees are not professional money managers. For instance, it might make sense to put it in 3-month CDs and roll it, or it might make more sense to put it in 6 months, because you can only pull this out at least on a once-a-year basis. So this is a large amount of money for somebody who, to be honest, I'm running for trustee of trust funds, may not have managed before. So I think it's fair to say that you have to have faith in who is ever elected as the trustee of trust funds, which is 3 people. It's not one person, for whatever town is managing in this fund, to do it wisely. And I know that it's worked out well for Plastown. I honestly am in favor of this for the school funds. I don't think your trustees are going to be rolling on the penny stocks on this. But you're right. I mean, it's with any elected official. You elect them, and then you have to decide whether or not, hopefully they'll do their job, and if not, get somebody else.
Sue, are you responding to her question?
Yeah, Barbara, this is a similar article that Plasto put into their warrant a couple of years ago to do that same thing, so that the investments we have could be put into a little bit more money-bearing, interest-bearing accounts and get more money on those accounts. And certainly the school accounts, particularly our scholarships, I'd like to build those up a little bit. Other than 20 cents a year, I'd love to get $20 a year on those investments that people have put into memorial scholarships. So this is a similar, we ran this by our lawyers. This is illegal. The terminology's fine to do this.
I'll just add a point of clarification. The trustee of trust funds currently have an obligation to invest the funds that they currently hold on behalf of the district. In 2014, the legislature wisely thought to allow them to hire professional organizations to assist them in how to invest those funds. This is just allowing our trustee of trust funds to hire a firm to help them invest those funds. So it's a pretty fiscally sound warrant article.
Okay, but again, my problem is there is no cap. It doesn't say, 1.5% or 10%, not to exceed. And I just would I'm looking to you for a reasonable maximum cap for how much those professional brokerages could charge us.
This is a non-money warrant article.
Oh, it is non-money? But it sounds like we're going to be giving them money. I don't understand.
The trustee of trust funds would be paying that out of the trust fund that they were managing. Our district would not. It would be coming out of.
Yeah, but the money would be going to somebody outside of the school.
It would. It would be going to whoever managing that money, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think you can.
Thank you. The gentleman behind, he's been calm and patient.
Good evening, Chris True, Sandown, True. I have a question on the last few words of this warrant article, and that it shall not be rescinded within 5 years. What gives the voters this year the right to tell the voters in 2 years what they can and cannot vote on?
Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
In both provisions of the enabling legislation, which is RSA 35:9-A, the law says no vote by a school district meeting to rescind such authority shall occur within 5 years of the original adoption of such article. So the legislature made that rule, and we have to follow that rule if it passes.
So that would be part as prescribed by law, non-amendable anyway. Any other questions on this article? Article 7. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Juliana Hale, Atkinson, New Hampshire. I don't know if your question was answered, and I'm going to take a stab at this, because I think what you were asking was, there's a fee involved when you use an investment company. It is definitely financially responsible to do that, but I don't think they know what the fee is yet because they haven't gotten that far. Typically, it's a sliding scale. So the more money you have invested, an investment firm will take a percentage. And most people who do this, if it's over $1 million, they tend to be able to get something pretty low in a percentage. That's just from what I've seen. So to answer your question, they can't really give you a number yet because they don't have that. But I mean, it can be 0.5, it can be 2%. If it's higher than 5%, I don't know, but it's not generally, it's usually a percentage. But I don't think they can give that to you yet. Am I addressing it? Correct, and that's going to be where we have to trust the trustees, that they shop that around and find something that's not ridiculous and makes more money. And to his point, that percentage can go up because they're getting more. It could be on the performance, but there should be a reasonable cap.
I think we have a new trustee of the trust fund member.
Any other discussion on Article 7?
I have a question with regard to the brokerage account. When you open up, so we do not have an existing brokerage account, correct? This is something where we would be opening a new brokerage account? Yes? Okay. So when you have a brokerage account, the capital can increase or decrease, and I understand that that's where the trustees of the trust fund come in. But when you open up a brokerage account, that opens up a lot more opportunities for additional financial investments with regard to CDs, mutual funds, et cetera. When you have a CD, there's the fee, and that would be set. But because of market fluctuations with regard to mutual funds and other types of IRAs and whatnot, would we have any type of say or control over what is done with those finances once the brokerage account is opened? Or is this something where if we voted this in, we wouldn't really have say onto which specific, whether it's a mutual fund or an IRA or a CD or what form of investment? Once we open that brokerage account, my concern is that it opens up a door of a lot of choices and a lot of decisions that we can't easily get out of. And if we take $1 million in capital and put it into something, when the market starts to drop, that capital will decrease. That's my concern. That's just basic market fluctuations. So my concern is, and my question is, once we open up, if we voted yes, does that allow them and that financial advisor just to make any choices and decisions based on our income and what they have to work with? Does that make sense?
And your "we," can you define which the "we" means? Can we have a choice? You mean the voters?
Citizens, voters, taxpayers?
Someone want to answer that? Yes?
So it's a valid concern. If this were to go through, the trustees of the trust funds would make the determination of where the investment would be made. I can't speak for them, but traditionally their investment strategy is very conservative. It's not like they're going to, I can't speak for them, but I wouldn't expect them to go and invest it in an aggressive growth mutual fund. It would be something that has less volatility than that. It would be a strategic, longer-term investment, is what I feel. Kim or Sean, if you feel differently.
Kim?
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, the trustee of trust funds are aware that this money in this capital reserve fund may only be there a year. So you're not going to go and invest it in something that is a long term, because they know that each year in March, the voters could pull all that money out. So, for instance, I think, say, Danville right now is maybe putting some of it into a 6-month CD because they know that it could be pulled out. It could even be pulled out by a special meeting, so you don't want to be overly aggressive with it. So, but again, it's up to, once this goes through, the trustee of trust funds are obligated to manage this. And there is a New Hampshire Division of Charitable Trusts that monitors the trustee of trust funds throughout the state.
All right, so basically fiscally responsible decisions that would be in the best interest with rolling CDs as opposed to things like mutual funds?
I can't,
Yes?
but that would
Okay.
be my guess.
That would be
Thank you.
the expectation anyways.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am?
Kay Galloway, Atkinson. I'm presently a member of the trustees of the trust fund in Atkinson. The present rate through the New Hampshire PDIP is about 2.4%. With regard to the investments, there are investments out there where you can purchase an annuity in such a way that they promise you that the initial capital will never go down. So I would just ask that you ask your investment advisor, once chosen, to be very cautious about the type of investment you invest in, because there are programs or documents out there where you cannot lose money. So just be careful.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further discussion on Article 7? Didn't know if someone was walking to the mic. Seeing nobody at the mic and no further discussion, Article 7 will appear on the ballot as written. Moving on. Article 8, change trustees of trust funds non-contingent. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District vote pursuant to RSA 198:20C, Roman numeral 2, trust funds, and RSA 35:2, reserve funds, to elect the trustees of trust funds of the town of Plastow, New Hampshire, to take custody of all school district established trust funds and reserve funds on July 1, 2019, and to administer such funds on behalf of the school district under the provisions of RSA 31:22. This article is not contingent upon the passage of Article 7 regarding charges for professional banking and brokerage assistance. Majority vote is required, recommended by the school board 9-0-0, recommended by the budget committee 10-0-0. Do I have a motion to place this on the ballot as written?
So made.
Thank you, Sean. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Lee. Sean, you're going to speak to this article?
Yes. So the town of Danville, the trustees of the trust fund for the town of Danville have been overseeing the Timberlane Regional School District's trust funds from what I can gather, since the inception of the school district. Yeah, it's been a long time. And the Danville trustees would actually like, when we were talking about a lot of this, actually, we're content with it. If Blastow wanted to do it, that's fine. They were okay with that. So we wanted to explore that. And this is going to allow the district to assign the transfer of funds from the town of Danville to the town of Blastow. And that's basically it.
Mr. Sherman?
So
And
Sean's
Ken.
right. Danville has kindly been the trustee of trust funds for 50 years. Maybe it's someone else's turn, and Danville requested Plastow to consider it. Sean and I approached the Plastow trustee of trust funds, and they're more than willing to take over the management of the money.
Thank you, Kim. No? Yes, ma'am.
Ann Gerns, Plastow. Is there any implied length of service on this, or do Plastow then goes paddling off for 50 more years? No implied term.
No, it has to be changed by warrant. So yes, Plastow can have it for the next 50 years.
And then it'll be someone else's turn.
Any further discussion on Article 8? Seeing no one at the mic, no hands risen behind me. Article 8 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 9, general acceptance of reports. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District accept reports of agents, auditors, and committees as written in the 2018 annual report? Majority vote required at the polls, recommended by the school board 9-0-0. Do I have a motion to place this on the ballot as written?
So moved.
Mrs. Sherman, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Boyle, thank you. Sue, are you going to speak on this article?
This is a template of the article that we have every year, and probably in your own communities you do too. This is to accept the reports that will come in.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Article 9? Seeing no further discussion, Article 9 will appear on the ballot as written. Article 10, SAU 55 withdrawal study by petition of Stephanie Doobie et al. Shall the Timberlane Regional School District, pursuant to RSA 194, capital C, number I, create a planning committee to study the advisability of the withdrawal of the Timberlane Regional School District from SAU number 55 in accordance with RSA 194C:2, Roman numeral 4, small a, for its organization, operation, and control, and the advisability of constructing, maintaining, and operating a school administrative unit to serve the needs of the Timberlane Regional School District. Recommended by the school board 8-1-0. Do I have a motion to place this on the ballot as written?
So moved.
Can someone give their name? I heard a lot of names say yes.
So moved. Sheila Rose.
Do I have a second? Would someone like to speak on this article? Leon from Atkinson. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Stephanie Doobie, Danville, New Hampshire. Good evening, Timberlane residents, parents, taxpayers, and students. Last year, over 150 of your friends and neighbors from Danville, Atkinson, Plastow, and Sandown signed this petition, now warrant Article 10, to explore the possibility of Timberlane withdrawing from SAU 55. School Administrative Unit 55, also known as SAU 55, is an administrative body which governs both Timberlane and Hampstead districts. SAU 55 is comprised of 14 members, 2 reps from Danville, 2 from Sandown, 2 from Atkinson, 3 from Plastow, and 5 members from Hampstead. Here are several reasons to vote yes for this warrant article. Timberlane pays 77% of the SAU budget and Hampstead pays 23%. However, Timberlane does not have 77% of the voting power at meetings given the current membership. This is a stark imbalance and does not benefit our district. Number 2, the Timberlane district is large enough that we should not be subcontracting out our employees to another district. We should be focusing on our own schools, not having our own employees split their time between the two districts. Number 3, each district has its own schools. Timberlane's kids go to Timberlane schools, Hampstead kids go to Hampstead schools, and then Pinkerton in Derry for their high school. And all Timberlane schools will remain intact and the children's education would be unchanged. Number 4, each district is separate and distinct. Timberlane's needs are vastly different from that of Hampstead's needs. Each district uses different reporting systems, different food service vendors, and each uses different evaluation tools. Number 5, we own all of our schools as well as the buildings which house the SAU staff. Those that signed the petition last year saw that Timberlane was and is not benefiting from this arrangement. In terms of a partnership, there is little to no gain for Timberlane to remain in the SAU with Hampstead. The reasons I just illustrated highlight the fact that this is not an equitable partnership and does not benefit the residents and taxpayers of Timberlane. Of particular note, at the January 23rd school board meeting, your Timberlane school board members voted 8-1 to recommend this warrant article. In closing, over the next few weeks, I will be attending Board of Selectmen meetings in each town to discuss this warrant article and the positive impact of Timberlane's possible withdrawal from SAU 55. This truly is a positive initiative and a step in the right direction for Timberlane's residents, taxpayers, and students. Please vote yes on warrant article number 10. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Article 10?
Jack Sapia, Atkinson. Well, I got to tell you, we have heard some numbers tossed out about the strategic plan and a potential bond amount. Every year, Hampstead donates towards the to run the administrative branch of our SAU, or they collaborate with us, and they donate $500,000 over a course of a 20-year bond. That's half the bond. That's $10 million of revenue we won't have to generate. The reality is that they share in some of the costs. Stephanie's a great kid. I love her. She's passionate, and she's a warm, genuine person. So we just probably disagree on this, which pains me. It has no effect on the children, either from the Timberlane or Hampstead, where they'll be attending school. It's really not a reason to break up the SAU and lose that $500,000. I see reason 2, and it wasn't brought up by Stephanie, but we need more control over the superintendent and his evaluation. So that's out there, so I want to discuss how he gets evaluated. He writes his own goals, and those get accepted by the SAU board. And at the end of the year, just like in corporate America, he reviews that, and it is up to the SAU board what his bonus and what his COLA is. Over the course of his tenure here, he's got an average 4% a year. So call it a 3% COLA with the 1% merit, but those are all goals. And as far as us not having control, which has been said here, we have weighted voting now. Doesn't that make the percentages of what we put in give us the proper representation? I think it does. And in addition to that, what that really means is on that SAU board, we have 9, the Timberlane Regional School Board has 9 votes versus the 5 from Hampstead with weighted voting. That means in a 7-7 tie, I mean, if you can't get 7 votes, then the motion that's whatever on the floor probably has no merit, and you got to go back and rework it. So to say we have no control over what's going on, that's simply not true. And like I said, I sat on the board. I knew these folks to be decent, reasonable people, It's always good to share best practices with other sides. I know right now things are tenuous, but boy, I'll tell you, what we're talking about here is administrative assistants. We're talking about administrators. We're talking about the business people. We're not talking about the schools. We're not talking about the teachers. We're not talking about the day-to-day operations that affect our children directly. So I don't want there to be any confusion. We basically lose $500,000 a year, and it's something that offsets some of our administrative costs. That's all we're talking about.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Rob Collins, Danville. I'd echo what Jack just said, but also, especially with the weighted voting, that's put in place by the legislature to allow any of the boards to weight the vote as it suggests, so that there isn't a discrepancy where there's 5 Hampstead members on the board. I was on the Timberlane board for 9 years, and it never was a problem, but apparently it is now. So, but with that said, I think we need to keep in mind why SAUs were created in the first place. The central offices were created to save money for school districts so that they could share those services among different school districts that need those services. So, but I'd also like to suggest that this is going to cost money to do this study. It's not going to be free. There's going to be attorneys involved, and so we need to cover ourselves for that. So I'd like to amend the motion, or I'd like to make a motion to amend the warrant article to say, and I have it here and I've signed it, shall the Timberlane Regional School District raise and appropriate $30,000 for a planning committee to be formed in accordance with RSA 194C to study the advisability of the withdrawal of the Timberlane Regional School District from SAU 55.
I do believe that this warrant article is prescribed by law.
Sir, can you come back? Can you print your name under your name?
Can't read it?
You must be a doctor, I'm not sure. Yes, you may. There's a discussion I'm having with the Timberlane attorney, Mr. O'Shaughnessy. This is only a planning study of a planning committee. It doesn't have any issue of raising and appropriate funds. Mr. O'Shaughnessy will speak to that, and then we'll come back to the maker, Mr. Collins. Yes, Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
Yeah, I'm not sure that DRA, if this amendment were to pass and the article were to pass at the polls in March, I'm not sure DRA would allow the appropriation. The problem is that this is a non-monetary warrant article right now, and the fact that there isn't an appropriation associated with it means that voters who didn't come today weren't aware or on notice that there may be an appropriation. So there may be a DRA disallowance. I don't, without reading into the future, I don't know if the DRA would disallow the entire article. They may just say you get zero money. That's it.
Okay, and if that's the case, I think you're saying we can allow the vote on the amended article, and then DRA would decide down the road.
No. That's really up to the meeting. Like, I don't control the meeting, so
Sure.
that's what would be the legal impact of the amendment. So the moderator decides, and the voters decide how they want to proceed.
It's always my position that I don't make legal opinions, although that's my profession normally, but not at town and school district deliberative sessions. So you have the right, I believe, you can put this forward. We just wanted you to understand what it may or may not do.
Okay.
You know, just as a question. You still need to get it passed, so first I need a second on this motion to amend that article to say raise and appropriate $30,000 for a planning committee to be formed, et cetera. And so do we have a second on the motion to put a raise and appropriate $30,000? Mr. Sapia, Jack Sapia, made the second.
Mr. Moderator, I'd actually like to challenge your ruling on this.
You have a right to do that. Do you have a second on the challenge?
I'll second.
So the question is to challenge my ruling to allow this motion to amend. So any discussion on the motion to challenge me to allow Mr. Collins to make his amendment?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Sean?
This is a non-money warrant article, and by changing it, we're injecting into this money funds. It is changing the meaning of the warrant article.
I'd like to add to that.
And Kim, yes?
The planning committee for an SAU withdrawal study is dictated by RSA. It would involve school board members, the superintendent. There are people chosen by the moderator of the district. I do not see where we would need any money associated with this warrant article for a planning study. There are no buildings involved. I know there are contracts involved with SAU employees, but I'm strongly not in favor of this. I think it diminishes the warrant article.
So we're speaking now only on the motion to overrule me. Yes, sir.
Yes, I don't believe you can do this, make it a money warrant article when it's a citizen petition warrant article. They're required people to go out and get signatures. What you're doing now is changing what these people signed to. That I don't believe you can do legally. So I say this would be an illegal vote. It should not be added, and it should go to ballot as written. It's only asking for if the people want a committee to be set up to study withdrawal. It doesn't say withdrawal. It requires no money.
Thank you.
Mr. Herb?
Peter?
As I recall, we a few years ago had the Sandown Withdrawal Committee, and I believe the total legal costs from that were about $35,000. So I believe this motion merely sets voter expectations for the true cost of the study. They should know that before they vote.
Ms. Doobie?
Thank you. When the idea of this petition was brought up last year, there was, thank you. There was some discussion about the possibility of, it costing money for this particular study. But without knowing the cost, without knowing, nobody can see down the road what's going to come of this, it made sense to frame it in such a way that allowed the folks that signed it, those that support it, to see whether or not it's something that they want to explore. Now, at this point, I'm completely against the idea of adding any monetary value to this because it goes completely against what I had initiated with this warrant article. And so that being said, I just wanted to address a couple of other points that were brought up, if I may.
No. We're only speaking on the body overruling me, that's all. You can come back later and speak to the point.
Okay.
Second of the motion.
So, I'm not speaking to the amendment. I'm speaking to you being overruled.
Correct.
I'm dead set against you being overruled because I don't want you to overrule me the rest of the night. And then we're going to come back to the amendment, correct?
We're going to come back
Thank
to
you.
the article and the amendment for more discussion on the amendment. Right now, we're only discussing whether I get overruled and poor Mr. Collins' motion gets killed. Any other discussion on overruling the moderator? Yes, sir. He'll let you go. I saw him walk.
I'm sorry, was Mr. Belo's comment about overruling, about the sand
I thought
down?
he was talking about the money.
Yeah, the money piece of it. Well, just to comment to that, the sand down withdrawal was completely different than what this is. That was talking about splitting up the Timber Lane district and where those students would go to school and buildings and other costs associated with that.
Yes, sir.
John Goldman, Sandown. I almost made it through an entire meeting without talking. But my question, I think, might be, it's not necessarily on the amendment, or excuse me, on the overruling, but it's on the ramifications of that. My question might be for Mr. O'Shaughnessy, but if the money gets put into this and this passes, does that mean that DRA, that it will still carry? DRA just won't let us take the money for that? Or does it mean that DRA, by them disallowing the funds, would disallow the entire warrant article?
Thank you for that question. That's a good question. Mr. O'Shaughnessy, are you able to answer that?
I left my crystal ball at home. I have no idea what DRA will do, so I'm not making any guarantees. My guess would be that they would take the sort of least restrictive action they could take, and they would disallow the appropriation. I'm not sure what that means for the rest of the article, and I'm not going to say that there is no risk that it kills the whole thing, because I'm not sure of that.
Yes, sir.
Josh Warnes, Danville. So my question would be, if we were to allow this, what would prevent someone from reducing it to zero or proposing that any of these petitions get appropriations to zero, which would then prevent spending any money on the purpose of the article?
Well, his motion hasn't passed yet. We didn't get to that point.
Right, but I just think it opens up a can of worms, right? So I agree with everybody who's spoken out to overrule you on this.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on overruling the moderator?
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for Mr. O'Shaughnessy. I was under the impression that this article had statutory language.
No.
That was quick.
Yes, ma'am.
Ann Gurns, Plasto. I am now lost in the labyrinth of Robert's Rules of Order. What are we currently voting on? Clarify, please.
Thank you for that question. That's a good question. So, Mr. Collins has made a motion to amend the article with a $3,000 raise and a $30,000 raise and appropriate. After discussion, I determined that, notwithstanding how it might legally or illegally be sought at, that he has a right to make the motion. It was seconded. Then my ruling to allow the motion, hasn't passed yet, but to allow the motion was objected to. So your vote of yes is to overrule me, and Mr. Collins' motion will die without a vote. It'll die. If you rule in favor and say nay, and don't overrule me, then we go to his motion and we speak on his motion, which could still be killed by the electorate here. Mr. Sapienza on the motion to overrule the moderator.
Well, Sean's probably going to ask me to repeat myself, but I'm a little confused here.
No, that won't happen, Jack.
No, not that I'm confused. So I've heard people talk about the $30,000 and what it was used for. Am I allowed to speak to that?
No.
But a number of people just have.
No, they're speaking about overruling me.
That's.
And then we go back to the motion. If I get overruled, we go back to the main amendment. I mean the main article. Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, I move the question and
Thank
put it
you.
to a vote.
I think we should. So if you're in favor of overruling my allowing the motion, you'll signify by saying aye. If you're against, you'll say nay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No. The ayes have it.
Sounded like the ayes have it. I'm going to give it to the ayes. So, Mr. Collins, regret to inform you your motion has been killed, but I'll give it to my assistant. So now we're back to the main article, Article 10, with no amendments. Article 10.
Okay, so.
Speaking on the article.
Yes, on the article. I sat on the Sandown Withdrawal Committee, and it did cost, so there's no confusion here, and thank God Brian put the extra 50,000. I wish we hadn't closed the, or restricted for reconsideration, because we did spend $30,000, $35,000 on that committee, and I don't believe it was because there were buildings. I believe it was because of legal and administrative costs. So there is a cost associated with, and we didn't know. We didn't know when everyone did this, that there were costs. Well, certainly the people that petitioned it didn't realize that there were costs. But there are costs that come up, and the district is legally obligated.
Point of order. That motion was just passed and the amendment was
I'm just saying the cost of running the.
Excuse me, I'm speaking to the moderator.
Well, you
I
interrupted
believe
me.
Jack's speaking, if I can read his mind, to whether or not he's in favor of having a planning committee, and he's speaking it's going to cost money.
Yes, and I just want people to know, before they cast a vote, that in fact there is a cost associated with that, and it will eat up about half of what Brian moved for legal costs. So, you know, when you vote, everyone should be armed with all the information. Limiting that, Kim, is inappropriate.
Mr. Collins?
Rob Collins, Danville. So I just want to add, I was also on the Sandown Withdrawal Committee. We did have to consult attorneys on a number of issues when we were going through our deliberations. The same thing will happen with this committee if it's done correctly. I don't want people, board members, people in the community guessing on what's going to happen with contracts, with what to do with Hampstead, with all of the issues involved. Legal counsel should be involved, and it is going to cost us money if it's done properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Newby?
So I think a couple of things I just wanted to point out. One of the issues that was brought up, I believe by Jack, was the idea that Hampstead contributes $500,000 towards the SAU budget. And I wanted to just, you know, kind of put that in perspective, because here we have a 70 million plus budget. And I think that at this point, it makes sense to think about what is most beneficial for our district. And, you know, when you think about 500K versus a $70 million budget, I mean, you know, knowing what I know about this district and how, and I served on the school board for 2 out of my 3 years, and I saw how Timberlane often got the back seat, and I don't want to see that anymore for this district, because I know there are a lot of tremendously hardworking folks in this district, and it just seems to me that it's worth looking into. I also wanted to mention the idea that even though Timberlane has 9 members on the board, Hampstead has 5, it's not equitable. It's not, you know, we don't have 77% of the vote when these folks meet at the SAU meeting. So that's not, I mean, that's really not, you know, a valid point, I don't think. From my perspective, I just wanted to point out that I think it just makes sense to see if it's an option for folks and see how it might benefit this district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over here. Yes, ma'am.
I'm hoping this is a question Mr. O'Shaughnessy can help with, sorry. So just so people understand the process, and I know a lot of this is in the language of the RSA, and I've looked at a few of the withdrawals that have been happening throughout the state, and it does seem to be happening more and more frequently, that these combined SAUs that were put together decades ago, for many reasons, districts are looking to split apart. But the first step in this is to have a committee decide if they want to pursue this or not. And if the committee decides that they don't want to pursue this, then that is the end of it. If the committee decides that they want to move forward with it, then they would continue with that, and then it would come again before the voters, before anything happened.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Phil Sherwood, Atkinson. Ms. Silva, I think, is correct. We have seen an increasing number of school districts, SAUs, begin the process to look into withdrawing. It's important to note that it's still pretty rare, and it's a quite radical move. It's rarely successful. And what's different about this effort is that an argument's being made that it will save money. That's unique, because the SAUs that have explored withdrawing didn't use a fiduciary argument, because just it doesn't line up. It won't save the district money. No SAU or districts have made that argument. It just doesn't add up. Now, they've been going in different directions, and it was worth them exploring splitting up. So what's unique about this is that the leading argument for withdrawing is that it will save us money. I'm not saying that's untrue, just saying history flies in the face of that. It is a radical move. I'm not necessarily ideologically opposed to looking at withdrawing, but I'm concerned about some of the arguments that I'm hearing. The common denominator to why districts typically look into splitting up, it's because of political disagreements. It's quite frankly elected officials on one side of the tracks disagreeing or not liking with elected officials on the other side of the tracks. Hey, we're all human. That happens. The problem is, we're considering making a permanent decision because of a temporary political disagreement. Now, some of those disagreements, quite frankly, have merit and should be aired out, and people raise their voices, and sometimes rightfully so. But to make a radical move, like withdrawing from an SAU, let's be honest about the arguments. It's not about money. It's because there are political disagreements that we haven't been able to find common ground on.
Thank you. Mr. Collins. I'd like to try to bring this to a conclusion. Mr. Collins.
Thank you. Rob Collins, Danville. I believe, and if the business administrator could confirm this or not, I'm putting you on the spot here, but I believe the last bus contract that came through, the savings because of the combined effort with Hampstead was low six figures?
I believe so. I don't have the exact figures, but there were some significant savings with the two districts bidding on that together for a number of reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Kim, do you want to respond to that?
I'd like to speak to that bus contract. That wasn't a coming together of the two districts. We requested that Hampstead go out for that contract with us, and they said, no, we're going to go out on our own. I would like the voters to know also that Hampstead has recently taken this board to court. There may be political disagreements, but it was not Timberlane that got Hampstead into court. Hampstead has also verbally made a resolution against the Timberlane board, making statements that were completely unfounded. I'd also like to state that this board has several times requested an SAU meeting as a board, and the chair, who is currently from Hampstead, has refused. So yes, there is some political issue going on here, but I certainly am strongly in favor of looking at what it will mean for Timberlane should we withdraw from this SAU. We are quite a bit different than Hampstead in the fact that we have a high school. Hampstead does not. They send their students over to Pinkerton. So while they're getting 23% of, or they're paying 23% of the bill, it's clear to me that we're involved with a lot more than just 23% of what they're getting out of this SAU. So I think there's some cost associated with that. And I can certainly tell you right now, because this board is being taken back into court, that it's costing this district money because of Hampstead. And I don't see it changing.
Ms. Doobie, something new?
Thank you. I think that for a lot of people who either sign this petition or are in support of this initiative, I think what it truly comes down to when you take all of these issues away, I think what it does come down to is local control. And it comes down to Timberlane having more control over its own destiny. And I think that when you compare that against what Hampstead doesn't necessarily bring to the table, I think it's really a win-win for Timberlane. And I don't think it's radical. I don't think it's radical for a district to look around and say, how are we benefiting from this relationship? If we're not benefiting, it's time to look at options. I don't think it's radical in the least. I think it's radical to, and I think it's improper, and I don't think it's practical to stay in a relationship if it's not healthy and if it's not equitable. So I don't think I would completely disagree with you that it's a radical thing. And by the way, there are other districts in New Hampshire who have successfully moved away from being a part of one particular SAU to start their own. And I think that it makes sense for us to look at those options.
Thank you. Mr. O'Neill?
Yeah, this warrant article is to simply do a study. The outcome of that study will then come back to the voters if it should determine that its withdrawal is a positive from that committee. So during that whole study, the public would be able to interject. You'll be able to see all these detailed conversations, which were actually, you would think that this is actually to formally withdraw at this point. This is to do a study. We have not been able to determine how long has this SAU 55 been in place with regards to Timberlane and Hampstead. We need to turn around and evaluate, should this prearranged marriage that was arranged by the state at some point, is it viable? And we're just looking at it, hey, let's evaluate that as a board and as a committee to come on out and do the best in an open forum where everybody gets to comment on all these various topics. It's great, democracy at its best.
Thank you. I had another speaker here.
Just for the record, I think Dr. Farrar had mentioned that Hampstead went its own way on the bus contract or something to that effect. Both districts do use one common provider of services, and that's for student. Both districts benefit from economies of scale in that particular arrangement, with the proximity of a bus yard right down the street, and to be able to have those costs shared. So I just wanted to make clear that it has no bearing on this, but as a matter of fact, they are using the same company.
Thank you. Mr. Muscola?
I'd like to call the question.
I was standing here.
The person that didn't speak is walking away, so we have a call or a question.
Go ahead, Jeff. Thank you.
Jack's spoken about 5 times.
No,
That poor
call the
lady that
question.
was up, I'd like her to speak. If you're going to let people speak, that lady should speak because she came up. She has yet to speak.
That speaks it right there. Let's move it.
So I have a question to move, and it must have been seconded by the lady that was going to speak. All in favor of moving the question? Aye. Opposed? We'll move the question. So there's no amendments. Nobody's at the mic. The question's moved, so Article 10 will appear on the ballot as written.
I'd
like to make a motion to limit reconsideration.
We have a motion and a second to limit reconsideration. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. It's number 11. Transportation costs by petition of Peter Below et al. In the event the TRSD budget fails to pass at 2019 elections to fully fund the TRSD transportation contracts now in place in 2019-2020 school year by raising and appropriating $460,303 through taxation. Not recommended by the school board, 900. Not recommended by the budget committee, 550. Do I have a motion to place this on the ballot as written?
I make a motion.
Made by Mr. Below. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a second? Let's get the second. Mr. Below, do you wish to speak on this?
Sure. Briefly. So
The reason I put this together was that the
Point of order.
school...
Point of order.
Yes, ma'am.
He is the petitioner on this. Shouldn't he be on the floor as opposed to being on the budget committee?
Would you prefer me down there? Your choice.
I think he can
Just go down
speak
there.
from there. We know he's the petitioner. I'll leave it up to Mr. Belo if he wants to go down.
I'm comfy here, thank you. Okay, so the reason we put this together was that the school board, in its putting together of their default budget, had underfunded the
Point of order,
transportation
Mr. Moderator.
contract.
Yes.
Is he speaking as a board member, or is he speaking as an individual? And if
I'm
he's
speaking as the
an
petitioner.
individual, he should be speaking from this microphone, not from that seat.
Mr. Herb, I'm whatever you wish.
Well, I'm getting tired of being overruled, so I think it would be nice, Mr. Belo, if you could step down to the front, and then there would be no concern about what position you hold and who you're speaking at. It's my understanding Mr. Belo is going to speak as the petitioner,
As an individual.
as an individual being the petitioner.
Thank you.
Am I correct, Mr. Belo? Absolutely. And you should remain down front for the rest of this warrant article, if you could, Mr. Belo.
Okay, after wasting those few minutes, are we ready to go this time? Okay. So we put this warrant article together because the school board had, in crafting the default budget, had underfunded the transportation contracts that are now in place. Now, subsequent to this being submitted, and subsequent to us learning that they had put the contracts, they had underfunded this contract at public hearing against the wishes of two lawyers. They did increase this line item in the default budget. However, frankly, they can, between now and when the ballot is published, they can make it lower again. So I'm speaking in favor of keeping this in place. Now, should the budget pass, this is null and void. There's no more money raised and appropriated. This only kicks in the case of a default budget.
Thank you, Mr. Belo. Anyone else to speak on Article 11?
I'd like to make an amendment, Article 11.
I had a lady that was standing up to speak. Would you like to speak on the article as written?
Yeah, I'm curious why the school board voted unanimously not to include this, and only half of the budget committee was in favor.
School board voted unanimously not to recommend it.
Okay, I'll be happy.
Somebody
answer
want to
that.
speak, Mr.?
The school board this summer went to a training session, and we were advised by the New Hampshire School Board Association not to do this because, in their legal opinion, it was not legal. And they said, you don't have the authority to do that. Then we heard a couple months later from Attorney O'Shaughnessy that said, in his opinion, you can do it. Then in another unsolicited opinion given to the SAU, that attorney also said, I think you can do it. So the school board said, well, when in doubt, we're going to go with legal opinion. We have 2 for, 1 against. The school board, no one on the school board was ever against the transportation of this. We had a signed contract, but we were clearly under the impression and directive and advice from the New Hampshire School Board Association, you guys cannot do that. And we were also afraid, which is why when we went back and revisited the default budget, and this is why I want to put a motion in, if the voters say no to something, the voters go with the school board recommendation, no means no. So if the voters vote for this article, so let's say theoretically the default budget passes, and then they vote against this article, there's a good chance we can't do anything, because the voters have said, no, you cannot take that money for transportation. As we speak, the money is in the proposed budget. It's currently in the default budget, and I will very shortly be adding language to to help the school board and the administration provide transportation in case the voters say no.
Before I take his motion, I'll let this gentleman just speak.
I'd like to make a motion to amend this article, and in place of $460,303, I'd like to change that to zero.
Well, I'm glad you brought up a motion, but I was going to let you speak on the article. This gentleman had already said he had a motion, and he's got it written, so I'll entertain his motion, then we'll go back to your motion. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to add the language at the end of Article number 11. The non-passage of this article will not prevent the school board and the administration from expending funds assigned to transportation within the budget.
A second by Jack Sapia. So this amendment by Mr. Boyle is to add at the end of the article, the non-passage of this article will not prevent the school board and the administration from expending funds assigned to transportation within the budget. On the amendment.
My question is, assigned when? Now, or assigned later, or transferred in at some later point?
Whenever necessary. In other words, Peter, if all of a sudden people, if we want to make sure that the school board administration have well within their authority to provide the transportation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first couple words you said. Assigned now, or transferred in later?
I don't know. All I can tell you is the purpose of this article, Peter, is if the voters say no, we want to make sure that no matter what happens on this article, that the school board and the administration can fully fund transportation. That's all it means.
May I ask a question of Attorney O'Shaughnessy?
Go ahead.
Would that be interpreted as, what was the term used, assigned now? Or would that be interpreted as appropriated now, or could that be interpreted as allowing money to be allow it to be zeroed now and move money in at some later point?
I'm lost. What are we talking about right now?
Could you read the amendment again, please?
The amendment is the non-passage of this article will not prevent the school board and the administration from expending funds assigned to transportation within the budget, specifically the budget, not the default budget.
So this whole assigned to transportation in the budget, is that assigned now, or could they theoretically zero that number now and take money out of some other account later on? It's a nuance, I understand.
So let me understand where we are. We have a proposed amendment which proposes a negative concept that the non-passage of this article will not prevent the school board and the administration from expending funds assigned to transportation within the budget. So if that article fails, they've just agreed to, this doesn't make sense. So this is not going to mean anything. I don't know what it's going to mean. I think the fundamental question here is if the warrant article as drafted does not pass, does RSA 3210, which we refer to as the no means no law, does it stand for the proposition that you will not be able, or the board will not be able to transfer money into the transportation line? I think that's the legal question. I don't know. I've read the statute, and I know there's legislators in the room. Maybe you guys can fix this year, but it's not really like worded to address the specific situation. It says, however, if the meeting deletes a purpose or reduces the amount appropriated for that purpose to zero, or does not approve an appropriation contained in a separate article, that's what this is, that purpose or article shall be deemed one for which no appropriation is made, and no amount shall be transferred to or expended for such purpose. Okay, so no court has interpreted that, to my knowledge. It's not really written to apply to this type of situation. Currently, the default budget has money in the transportation lines. Currently, the operating budget has money in the transportation lines. I don't believe the board intends to change that. You need to provide transportation. So your options are, yes, you can transfer money, even if this fails, or we have another special meeting and I come before you and say, you need to appropriate money now to provide transportation. So that's the result. That's the best I can do to answer that question.
Hi, Mr. Moderator. Jim Garrity from Atkinson. I happen to be a moderator in Atkinson, and you and I were at moderators training just a couple weeks ago, and we talked about the no means no law. And the scenario here is, if the voters say no to the proposed budget, then we've got the default budget. And the default budget has a transportation amount in it. So that means you can spend it. But if Article 11 fails, the voters are saying, we don't want you to spend $303,000 on transportation. So that default budget, you can't, theoretically, you can't touch that line. So what Article 11 tries to solve, it actually might break. So just be really careful. You may want, just a suggestion, and I appreciate your amendment, but like you said, if people vote no on the article doesn't exist. It's not like you can't put any power in something that failed. So just, you got to be careful. You may, I don't know if you want to put some fuzzy language in here about study or whatever, but you're in danger. You're in danger.
So Jim, you for or against the amendment?
Am
The whole
I for or
article.
against the article?
Yeah.
Well,
we're speaking on the amendment.
I'm just be careful. Just be careful. And if you zero it out, you can't spend transportation money on, can't spend money on transportation, period.
Thank you,
If you zero it.
Mike?
Well, that's what we try to point out.
My question's for Mr. Belo. Would you consider withdrawing this petition?
You can't. I don't think you can.
Well, to Mr. O'Shaughnessy, what can you do to null it out?
I have that answer.
Vote no.
Peter, you've made a mess.
So I appreciate.
So we're speaking on the amendment, please?
Yep, I'm
And
getting
can
there.
we hold personal comments back? We're speaking on the amendment.
So I appreciate Brian's effort to rectify this with this particular amendment. Thank you, Brian. I think Jim may have hit the nail on the head. What I suggest this floor does is go back and create a further amendment that says to create a study or something that swings this in a specific area where we're not running the risk. I mean, this is a nightmare. This is a train wreck, and there's almost no way to fix it, but maybe Jim just found a new mousetrap, so I'd like to see someone make a suggestion. And I personally don't know what that would be.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to see this amendment withdrawn, and because I don't think there's anything in the RSAs that said Mr. Belo couldn't withdraw his article. I think he can do that, and that would take care of everything.
You put this as a
Citizen petition warrant article that he could withdraw.
Can you add that? Can you add this as advisory only? Can you add, is this advisory only?
Let's see what Mr. Shaughnessy's going to say, he's thinking.
The petitioner is not, I mean, there is no single petitioner here, first of all. There are a number of petitioners. So how does a single petitioner withdraw the petition that other petitioners have signed? That's just a practical issue. The second issue is it's already on the warrant. I don't know of any way to remove something from the warrant. It's moving to a ballot in whatever form it is after today. What was the second question?
I was wondering if we could somehow reword
Making it
it be a study or...
making it advisor. I mean, here's my suggestion. If you want to table this for 10 minutes and let me think about it, I don't have an answer, but maybe I can come up with something.
Okay. I have no problem with tabling this because I think it's an important issue to take care of. And so I'd like to table this for Mr. Heffernan.
Dennis Heffernan, Plasto. If you took this amendment, and Peter was willing to, and he zeroed out the amount of money there, would that accomplish what we're looking for?
No.
Good try, though.
One more.
Appreciate it.
I'll take one more, and then I'd like to see if we can take a short break, and we'll just move on to the next article, and we'll come back to 11. Yes?
Thank you. This would be to the attorney, and I'm all for tabling this so that we do the best to get this right. But to the attorney, is there any way we could possibly word this where the voter intent becomes more clear, where it's appropriating $460,000 above and beyond the appropriation laid out in the default budget? In other words, so if it fails, the voters are clearly saying the default budget stands. I know we're swimming in gray waters here, but is there a way that you could envision we could put a motion that, again, lets the default budget stand, and if this passes, great, or not great, but it protects the default budget?
I just need 5 minutes to think about this and not answer any other questions.
I would like to give our
if you
attorney
give me that,
that 10 minutes that he asked for. So
I'll come up with an answer.
I'm
I'll
going
make a
to
motion to
table
table this.
the further discussion of Article 11 until perhaps after we get through 12. And we'll go back to 11. One of the makers of the motion says fine. So we're moving on for now to Article 12. We'll come back to 11 soon. Article 12, High School Athletic Track by petition of Rob Collins et al. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District raise and appropriate the sum of $312,000 for the repair and replacement of the Timberlane Regional High School track, and to authorize the district to withdraw up to the sum of $312,000 from the existing school building construction, reconstruction, capital improvement, and land purchase capital reserve fund, no amount to be raised by taxation, majority vote required, not recommended by the school board, 900, recommended by the budget committee, 550. Do I have a motion to place this on the warrant as written? I believe Mr. Collins is going to make that motion. Seconded by Mr. Sapia. Mr. Collins, do you wish to speak on this?
I do. Since the public hearing, I've gotten more information about the track and other areas around the track, specifically the runways for the long jump, the triple jump, and the pole vault, as well as the high jump area. I found out that all of those areas are also unusable for competition and very difficult for the students to use for practicing because of heaves and cracks in the pavement and the track surface. And this says the high jump apron is similarly damaged and unusable. And then there's the track issue that we discussed at the public hearing, which is basically that the track is delaminated from the underlying surface. And there was a bid proposal that the facilities committee went out and grabbed, and that's what that number is based upon, where it discusses everything that needs to be done. And specifically, they say, it is the opinion of Cape and Island Tennis and Track that the existing surface cannot be resurfaced again, despite looking like it might be reasonable to do so. This type of surface needs to breathe to allow vapor to escape. Once surface reaches a certain age and has been previously recoated, embedded silt and organic materials, plus the additional coatings, have reduced its porosity. Therefore, we recommend surface replacement when the surface becomes no longer acceptable for its intended use. And then they go on to give two options. The option that includes the resurfacing that I just discussed is the $312,000 option.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on this article? Mr. Sapia.
Yes, I stand in favor of this. I think for me, and as you know, I've championed for the athletic department many, many years. This really comes down to an issue of equity. The track is part of our infrastructure. As you can see, we had a decibel issue at the PAC Center. We jumped right on it, spent, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000 at least. We just approved, and with the full support of the board and the committee, $530,000 for the PAC. I don't even think, if you compared the performing arts, and they do a phenomenal job, and I'm so proud of Mr. D, if you compare that to what we expend in the athletic department and for our student athletes who do, they're just as important as any other segment of our Timberlane community. But to think that our children potentially for years may not have a home track meet, we have a responsibility to them. Now, I've heard it said that, well, if you look around, everything is subpar, everything is deplorable, you're never going to get a perfect field. Well, you could have had a perfect field if you'd voted in turf, but that's another story for another day, right? But is now our new measure subpar is okay? Now, I reached out to the people at Brock's Industries and Aggregate Industries, and what was described to me by, I think, the athletic director was, the bubbling, and they said, yes, that is a common occurrence. And with every single person I spoke to mentioned that Cape Cod Track and whoever that company is, that they are the authorities on this, and that's where we got our quote. And I'd like to thank Mr. Geary for his hard work. What they did tell me, what was recommended, is sometimes you can scrape that rubber off and you don't have to put a 1-inch layer of 3/8-inch top binder on top. Sometimes you can get away with it, sometimes not. Really, you'd never know until you stop peeling the stuff off. But that's what was recommended, and I think the student athletes need our support. Now, I did see one rep who has her hand up right now. I saw a post by her, and she said, Sheila said, well, we only got one quote, and there were $65,000 worth of bells and whistles. Let me remind everyone that for the PAC Center, we only got one budget number. And I would be all for, if it meant getting the track done and reducing whatever those bells and whistles were to get the students back on the track, I'm all for that. They deserve this. They've earned it. And to think you may be a freshman at this school and never run a home track meet, I would have liked to have seen it put in the budget. That's where our infrastructure and our general maintenance issues need to go, not by a citizen's petition warrant article. It's part of our responsibility of general maintenance.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make an amendment to this if I could. I'd like to amend the amount number from $312,000 to amend it down $65,350 to $247,525. The reason why I'm amending this is
Second by Mr. Sapia.
I'm sorry?
Trying to repeat that we have a motion and it's been seconded. So I'm sure you got that in writing with your name on it, right?
I will in 1 second.
So if I heard you correctly, at this hour, you said you want to amend the $312,000 where it appears in Article 12 and insert $247,525. Am I correct?
Correct.
So that's the motion, and it's seconded. Would you like to speak on that?
I would, actually. I have the same thing that Mr. Collins was looking at also. And there is also, there is a first bid for the $312,875, but there's also a deduct alternate. So instead of maroon, we could go with black and we could deduct $65,350 off this. So that is what I'm recommending, is that we go with black instead of maroon, and we take it down to $65,000, and hopefully that will be a better price for people to pass.
Speaking on the amendment, Jeff.
Yeah. I would love to see a show of hands from the committee and the board. If you guys support that, I won't show up here next year. Brian, come on, I'll get 2 hands.
Don't make promises you can't keep.
I'm confident I'll get 2 hands from you on that. But no, that's a great compromise, and it gets the kids on the track. Would I prefer the maroon? Sure. I'll sneak out there at night with a paintbrush, but let's get it done for the kids.
So we have anybody else to speak on the amendment to reduce the amount to $247,525? Yes, Mr. Collins.
Thank you. And you're speaking to, I believe, the deduct alternative, the black Plexitrack lighting?
That's exactly what I'm speaking to. I'm talking about the deduct alternative, black Plexitrack lighting.
So I'd like to call Mr. Gary to the microphone to address what the differences are between what you're saying is just maroon and black, because I don't know either. So if we could.
Well, it just says, in lieu of maroon, polyurethane system will provide and install a black half-inch Plexitrack lighting, water-based, all-weather track surface.
No, I understand. I read it too. I'm just wondering if Mr. Gary could address the technicality of it.
Mr. Gary, can you add to that? Thank you.
Just to clarify any confusion, we were talking about 2 different materials. You have the water-based latex black Plexitrack that was $65,000 less versus polyurethane system, 2 different materials. The polyurethane system holds up better long-term. That's why we had it priced out. So it was more than just the color. When you choose the polyurethane system, you have the ability to choose the color. So in order to fall in line with the other finishes on the campus, we just had them price out maroon, but if you chose a black polyurethane track, it would likely be the same cost. So, one's latex, one's a polyurethane.
What's the life expectancy difference between the two?
Off the top of my head, I believe it was a 5-year warranty, and that's typical.
On the Plexi?
On both, I believe it's the same warranty.
So same warranty, but did they give you life expectancy on each?
I think it was 10 to 15 years. I don't know off the top of my head. But.
So no difference between the 2 materials then?
If I recall correctly, the polyurethane was easier to add to resurface when that time comes than the latex. There's also the thought that if somebody has a latex allergy, they may not be able to use a latex track. But it's a common material. Both are common throughout the country. So we just had a budget for both items.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing no one at the mic, all in favor of the amendment to reduce the amount to $247,525, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstain? Aye. Closed. Can we have a show of cards? All in favor of the amendment to reduce the amount to $247,525, please raise your card. All those against, please raise your card. Six and one, that's 7. The ayes have it 53 to 25. So the amendment passes. Now we're speaking on the article as amended with the new number of $247,525. Any discussion on that? Yes, sir? Are you coming up or not?
I can,
Mr. Boyle.
I just, I guess going to go to the ballot. I just want to speak against this motion because I personally don't think this is a way, serving on the Facilities Committee, part of the Strategic Plan Committee, this is not the way to do improvements in your school district. Next year, you're probably looking at a bond between $20 and $30 million. We know, as a board, there are other issues in the works. Just every petitioner has a right to do what they want. But if you look at where we sit, whether it's a roof for the middle school, I can find several ways to spend between $200,000 and $300,000.
Mr. Sapia.
Yeah, the reality is I've sat on a lot of strategic planning committees with capital investments over $100 million. To put out a number how much the bond is going to be at this point is premature at the very least. In addition to that, strategic plans and capital investments are data-driven, and from that data, you do an analysis of it, and then you come to your conclusions, and then you present. That's how it's done. But here's the simple reality. Even if everything worked perfect, and we're at least 2 years away from that, let's say we did come up with it, it could fail year after year after year, and that track would sit out there with no track meets 2, 3, 4 years. We're at least 3 years away if we don't do this tonight. So, you know, the reality is, I think we made a great compromise with the amendment. I appreciate Sheila's effort, and I think it's time, like I said, there's a lack of equity on this campus, a tremendous lack of equity. And the student athletes sit on the floor when they're injured, and we don't get half the facilities that we need, and the coaches do without, and the athletes do without certain things primary things that they need. And you know what, I think we need to raise the bar and be proud of where we are and be proud of our athletes. And the first thing we do is give them the resources to practice their sport.
I just had a question. Was Mr. Fantasia on the list of people allowed to speak?
Yes, he was.
Is he here?
She's asking
If I have a question?
He's not here.
Okay.
On the other end, yes?
I'm going to agree with Brian. I do not support this warrant article. I find it rather interesting that Mr. Sapia is talking about strategic planning when he sat on a board that let the strategic plan for the district lapse for several years. It was not until this board initiated a strategic plan that was approved, I think, the beginning of this year. There had not been one for several years. I think it's important that the district take a holistic look at facilities as we move forward with this strategic plan. That's nothing against athletics at all. We have other concerns, as somebody said, the middle school roof has issues. There are other roofs in the district. We're looking at potentially pulling out over $500,000 out of $1.4 million and thus reducing what we have in capital reserves. Pulling this money out is not going to afford us very much. The capital reserve amendment, or the capital reserve warrant article, only speaks to putting money in there if there's any left at the end of the fiscal year. So I'm against this. I think we're in a place right now that we are trying and have been for quite a few months to try to get a look at what our facilities are, what they need, what we're going to need to be going out for. And typically when you do things in a larger fell swoop, you're going to save some money. So I'm against this.
Jack Sapia, 5 Crystal Hill Road. Kim, I'd like to know where I led a strategic plan lapse. I never sat on the committee. I offered to have the CIP
Point of order. Point of order.
That, you know what, you're right, Mr. Moderator.
Thank
I
you.
would love to know where Ms. Farah gets her facts. I never sat on the strategic planning committee. It never lapsed. As a matter of fact, when I went in to visit their strategic plan, the door was locked. I was met at the door and told that they would be done in 15 minutes until I had to remind someone after repeatedly that that was a public meeting. I was actually there to let someone know that Mr. Constantino had taken a turn for the worst. Should I say Chief Constantino? So as far as following the rules and letting the strategic plan lapse, I have no idea what she's talking about. I, as a matter of fact, was the one that complained for multiple years that after, wait a minute, I will get to it.
Jack,
After 3 years.
Jack, you made your point that she was
Okay,
incorrect.
All right.
Thank
And
you, Jack.
as far as
Thank you,
piling, as far as piling stuff up, the application to the track, the process of fixing the track is an independent thing that's done by one contractor. There is no advantage, no cost advantage in doing that in conjunction with anything else. That will never happen. That's completely inaccurate. She's got to get her facts straight.
Mr. Collins, and then
Mr.
Sean.
Moderator, in terms of the strategic plan and Mr. Sapia's involvement or non-involvement, I was speaking to the fact when he was on the school board during that tenure, the strategic plan, there was not a new one initiated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just real quick, I want to say it's a difference of opinion, obviously, I have with Dr. Farah, but I think the capital improvement fund, capital reserve fund, is exactly for this purpose. It's a piece of our infrastructure that's failing. The kids can't use it to compete on it anymore. We should be using this money because it's available so that we don't impact the taxpayers by correcting something that's not usable anymore. So I disagree. I think we should be voting for this so that the kids can get the full benefit of something that's on our campus that should be maintained and should be functional for the kids to use. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Eileen Doobie, Plastows. I think that we have pretty much beaten this. So I would like to yet again say, let's move the question.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to move the question.
Even with a new person on there?
Yes.
I'd like to make an amendment.
All in favor of moving
I'd like
the
to make an
question,
amendment.
say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
I think the ayes have it. So, any further discussion or amendments? You said you wanted to make an amendment?
I'd like to make an amendment so we can raise this through taxation. Let the voters decide what they should do. So, Jen, could you read what you came up with there?
I'm missing part of it. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District raise and appropriate the sum of $247,000 for the repair and placement of the Timberlane Regional?
Yes.
It wasn't.
I think the moderator just asked me.
Well, I think the
I'd like to,
gentleman
I'd
may
like
be
to
correct.
reconsider, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider Article number 12.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded to reconsider Article number 12. Any discussion on reconsideration?
I made the motion. and I
Mr.
think
Boyle made the motion.
Lee Doobie.
Lee Doobie seconded. Discussion on the reconsideration to enable him to bring up his motion. We had the question moved. The reconsideration was not frozen yet by a motion to restrict reconsideration. Mr. Boyle asked for us to reconsider that article. That would enable him to bring up his motion. So on reconsideration only, any discussion on reconsideration? Reconsideration only.
David Knight, Danville, KNIGHT. I think that when we haven't asked for anybody to lock up the vote yet, when one of our elected officials thinks they have a way to move forward with a compromise that might work for us, we should give them the chance to bring that forward and give them a few minutes to do their jobs. I would wish that you would support the motion for reconsideration.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion to reconsider. Seeing no one at the mic, all in favor to allow reconsideration, indicate by signifying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Nay. We'll have those cards again, my counters. If you're in favor of reconsideration, in favor of opening the question, raise your cards. If you're opposed, you can put your cards down. If you're opposed to reconsideration, raise your cards, please. For, 52 against. The motion to reconsider fails. The Article 12 as a... So now we have Mr. Sapia making a motion to restrict any further reconsideration, seconded by Mr. Belo. Any discussion on that motion to restrict reconsideration? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. I assume there was no abstentions. Article 12, as amended, will appear on the ballot. I'm going to move to 13 because I believe our attorney has a suggestion, but I would like to go to 13 and then go back to 11. 13, amend Articles of Agreement to weighted voting by petition of Jack Sapia et al. Shall the voters of the Timberlane Regional School District change Article 2 of the Articles of Agreement to incorporate weighted full-time weighted voting based on percentage of the student enrollment of each town? If warrant article, the way it's written, ... passes, this warrant article is void. Not recommended by the school board, 9-0-0. I'll have a motion to place this on the warrant as written, made by Mr. Sapia. Do we see you have a second? Seconded by Mr. Collins, Rob Collins. Mr. Sapia has a motion to amend. He did sign his name, didn't print his name underneath, but he signed his name. Shall the residents of the TRSD direct the TRSB to use weighted voting in all votes, including the organization of the school board and selection of officers? Each town shall be entitled to 1 vote per school board rep for every increment of $1 million of contribution to the district raised by their town. Any remaining financial contribution from each town shall count as 1/10 of 1 vote for every $100,000 increment. Contributions shall be based on the prior year's financial contribution by each town directly to the district. The school board members present at a school board meeting shall be entitled to cast the entire number of votes assigned to their town, provided that each representative present shall be entitled to a proportionate share of the total to be cast. Tough to understand, Jack. You want to explain your motion?
Yeah, sure. Basically, it's very simple. If you come from... Hey, look, you guys always talk about me leaving stuff out. I tried to be thorough. It isn't easy, and I'm sorry. But actually, I'm not sorry. So the gist of this is, if you're from the town of Atkinson and your donation into the district, your financial contribution into the district for a fiscal year is $12,800,000, each one of the school board reps has 12.8 votes. Very similar. What I basically did is I took the weighted voting that they use at the SAU, and instead of using pupils, I used dollar amounts. It's very simple. If you're from Danville and you contribute $10 million a year, you will have 10 votes per school board rep. So, and I have to admit that the reason why I started doing this wasn't quite the reason why I ended up. What I will tell you, my purpose in doing this is to have representation proportionately with the amount of contribution we put in there. And I will tell you, a number of the school board reps made a number of statements, and one of them made it quite clear that this was really kind of a good thing to do. So Kim said we're paying 70, as it relates to the SAU, or the logic behind it is we're paying 77% of the bill. Why do they have 35% of the say? Again, Brian said weighted voting is the ultimate in fairness. Sean, every vote should require weighted voting. Another comment he made is, why not weighted voting? Jen made a very compelling case that in the case of an absent weighting, in the case of absence, weighted voting makes sure every vote counts. Mrs. Sargent, and she's the one who really made a lot of, more sense than the others. Each town thinks differently. Towns have different challenges. She argued for proportionality and as it pertains to representation. I've seen a lot of things happen, and this board, our school board, fight very hard for weighted voting when it came at the SAU level. Some things I did not like, and I have it all here, but I'm not gonna read it because I think it's been a fairly cordial meeting this evening. As I said, Mr. Sargent made a phenomenal point. The towns are different. They make it. So here's one of the reasons, okay, that as I was writing the first warrant, I was watching a school board meeting, and Kim said she went to the bond bank. I think she didn't do that at the direction of anybody. And then she said her gut feeling thinks that the bond should be about $40 million. By doing this, she set the narrative because she had to. The discussion turned from one into finance instead of one of needs. She's a Danville rep with a unique set of challenges, and the first being an extremely high tax rate. She's fighting to mitigate the impact on her town. I understand that. That's her prerogative, and I sympathize with that particular town. But the flip side of that is that towns like Atkinson and Plastow contribute hundreds of millions of dollars more. The direct impact on each town is very, very different. We are impacted disproportionately to our contributions and our representation. Let's face it, when there's a warrant article, the history shows, the data shows that typically 2 towns vote against moving the district forward when it comes to financial investments, and 2 towns always vote the other way. The effect that it has, truly, is on not only our children and the type of environment in which they learn, but it also has a dramatic impact on our property values. We need to move this district forward in a positive light. We need to keep up with, we're competing relative to our property values with Dover, with Exeter, with Winnicott, with Salem, all with new and updated facilities. So my point is, there are certain motivating factors for certain towns that aren't consistent with the ones that are bearing the major burden, and really all this does is give us proportionate representation to what each town is contributing. I think it's fair.
Thank you, Jack. I'll go to this lady, and then we'll go to the board. So, yes, ma'am.
My question was actually for Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
Oh, he'll be back in a minute. So we'll go here to the board. You had a question or a comment?
My comment and question was to the attorney as well, and the legality of us being able to propose this. Yep. So I'll wait.
My question is, when I think the weighted voting was based on financial contribution that each town brings to the district. Does that include aid or not?
Can you speak to the mic, Mr. Sapp?
Yeah, it's all inclusive. And the other thing relative to whether this is legal or not, I can tell you that Monadnock did this very thing, but they used their census as opposed to pupil counts or so this is not, just because it isn't mandated by an RSA, doesn't mean you can't do it. And I agree that at the SAU level, it is mandated by the RSA, so therefore you have the option to do it or not to do it. So just because it's not mandated doesn't preclude you from doing it.
Thank you. Follow up?
Monadnock SAU?
No.
Mr. Collins?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the Monadnock Cooperative School District uses weighted voting in every vote for their school board and their budget committee. The policy's online if you want to take a look at it, and it had to go through a Board of Education approval at the state level when they implemented it, and it is based on the most recent census for each town. That's what they use to weight the vote. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Kate Delfino, Atkinson. I think any discussion about changing the way the votes are counted on the school board for Timberlane, I think that's something that needs to have more in-depth discussion than we could possibly have here tonight. And I think it needs careful study in order for it to have any kind of long-term legitimacy. So this may be a great idea, but if it is, I think it's something that needs some study, thought, and data put behind it so that there's more information that we can provide to the voters. Maybe this is an opportunity to form another study committee, and I'm not suggesting that. But I just don't think there's enough. This is a big change, and I just don't think there's enough information about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out just the line underneath, not recommended by the school board, 900. Not one of the school board members up here recommend this. I mean, that's pretty telling, quite frankly. If there isn't one member from either Plastow or Atkinson, Sandown, Danville, none of them recommend it, that's pretty telling to me.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask a clarification question. Is this...
Question is, are you a registered voter?
Yes, I am. I'm from Danville, registered. Anyways.
Your name?
Taylor Conlon,
Thank you,
Danville.
Taylor.
I wanted to ask a clarification. Is this financial weighted vote determined by student population, like amount of money per student, or is it separate financial donation?
It's your motion, Mr.
Yeah,
Savia.
it would be cumulative, the total cumulative amount contributed by each town. To Mrs. Delfino's point, if I can remember it now, to Mrs. Delfino's point, this is a philosophy that was adopted and supported by 8 out of the 9 school board reps when it came to the SAU thing, okay? And I read some of their reasoning for supporting the philosophy of weighted voting. I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and yeah, it is kind of interesting that they all voted, with the exception of one, thank you, Sarah, all voted for it at the SAU level and made perfect sense of it, and then all of a sudden, it gets put in their backyard, and now they're all against it. I'm sure with the amendment, they're all going to vote for it.
Yes, ma'am.
Jean Marie Ward, Atkinson. My question is for Mr. O'Shaughnessy, now that he's back. Does this conflict with RSA 195-19?
I was just reading that. How did you know I was reading that part of the law?
I don't know.
Maybe. So, one to clarify for folks here, 195-19 basically is the part of the law that says that cooperative school districts have to comply with the constitutional mandate of one man, one vote, one man or woman, one vote. Try to be correct there. And I kind of understand what Jack's trying to do, but I don't really know if this works. One of the concerns I have, we did a little bit of research in my office on whether this would comply or create issues, is that you already have proportional representation on the board based on population. I think in 1977 at the time that provision was amended. So to add weighted voting to what is already proportional, does that compound the problem and take it out of being proportional representation? One legal issue. The second issue I have is just the The way this is calculated is based on financial contribution from each town. Financial contribution, I'm not sure what that means. There's really two different formulas for how money is apportioned among the towns, and one of them is based on both attendance of students and equalized valuation in the towns. So that also creates problems. So I don't have an answer for you. It's possible that it might not, Jack. You know, possible. I don't have an absolute answer.
Just for clarification, it is the total amount that a town writes a check out for what their total contribution is, okay? And the only thing I can say is we had proportionality in 1977. I'm thinking if you're Sandown, it behooves you to want that proportionality updated.
Thank you, Jack. Yes, on the board.
If I can, I'll address the question that you had, St. Michael's back there, the purple. Your question was the amount based on population or just total contribution? It sounds like it's going to be the contribution by town. However, it's important to remember that the way that our apportionment works, a significant amount of that apportionment is attributed to the student population within the town.
Yes, sir.
So to the comment about, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, why was it done at the SAU level and not at the school board level? Pretty simple in my opinion why I was in favor of it at the SAU level. It was entitled to us by statute, by law. There is no standing for it to be done at the local school board level. That's why I voted to not recommend this warrant article.
Thank you, Kim.
I agree with Mr. Doobie. It wasn't a philosophy. It was a statute that this board chose to do at the SAU level. I voted against this because, as was discussed in the public hearing, the idea of full-time weighted voting with no calculations, no numbers, no forethought, as Mrs. Delfino said, I just think that we need to look at this. I'm not against it philosophically. I am against moving to something like this without much thought and deliberation by the board to make sure that it's equitable over the long term.
Mr. Belo, on the amendment.
Question for Attorney O'Shaughnessy. You're earning your money tonight, Jim. How is this situation different than, somebody mentioned it earlier, I think it's Monadnock Cooperative School District? If they can do it, why can't we?
I don't know. I represent Monadnock.
I know, that's why I thought you'd know if it was legal or not.
They haven't asked me to inquire, and I'm not touching that unless I'm asked.
Smart man.
Jack, we have a new speaker behind you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Karen Steele Atkinson. I'm really concerned about this word contribution, given that the facilities, most of them, at least middle school, high school, PAC, all the fields are in Plastow, and we utilize Plastow Police. That's a very significant contribution.
And fire.
It's not just the amount, and the fire department, et cetera, all the other services. I'm very concerned the wording of this. I think we should vote this one down.
I just want to speak to Mr. Doobie's point.
No,
Yes.
can we wait?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a philosophical problem with this. You know, when the Constitution was written in such a way that the big states were balanced off by the small states were balanced off against the big states by the way the Congress was established. We're setting up a situation here where it's based on revenue contributed to the towns, or from the towns to the district. And that revenue is two parts. It's based on the population, and it's also based on the valuation of the property in the towns. The value of the property is used for construction and infrastructure. But, so what can conceivably happen is that the big towns, that is Plastow and possibly Atkinson, could basically take their weighted votes and bully financially the small towns. I think that unless there's some form of balance to restrict and control how that power can be distributed, there's a risk here of people being, small towns being kind of overrun.
So-
I think that, you know, we go by one person, one vote. We've set up a structure based on a number of criteria that hasn't changed much since the district was formed. And I really see no reason why we need to change it.
So
Mr. Mescola had his hand
Okay.
up, and I'll go back to you, Jack.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
I'd like to address first Mr. Doobie. Mr. Doobie's completely right, that weighted voting at the SAU level was afforded him by the RSA. Absolutely, and you exercised it, and you had every right to exercise it. But as the debate went out, nobody asked for more conversation, or more dialogue, or more research. In this particular case, we're putting it before the voters, and have faith in the voters to do the right thing. Relative to Mr. Gurn's point, I appreciate it and I understand it, but for the first 50 years, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, those smaller towns were treated very fairly by the towns of Atkinson and Plastow. And might I remind everyone that Sandown is no longer a small town. They have the highest enrollment in the district. So, or off, what is it, by 10 students? Yeah, it's pretty close. So, to make a long story short, the only thing I as a rep, I as a resident, I as a parent, have always looked at my partners in Danville and Sandown, or wherever. I've looked at this as one school district. I've never differentiated the children in Danville versus the children in Atkinson. They're all one in my book. We're one team. But at the end of the day, you know, no one, I didn't hear this when the warrant article was out 2 years ago to change the Articles of Agreement, how we appropriated funds. It was, you know, Atkinson was going to incur another $1,500 to $2,000 a household, and Danville was going to, no one said it wasn't fair. No one's, you know, made some of the comments that were being made tonight. But this board, overwhelmingly, person by person by person, suggested that weighted voting was the fairest and most equitable way to do this. I mean, you did. And all my point here is, if it is fair at the SAU level and so compelling at the SAU level, then why wouldn't you adopt the same amount of fairness to those towns that contribute the bulk of the resources to the district? They should just have proportionate representation. That was my point.
Thank you, Jack. On the end.
Thank you. I agree wholeheartedly with what Mrs. Delfino said. I'd like to make an amendment, make a motion to amend.
We're on an amendment now, so you'll have to hold your amendment till we finish Jack's amendment.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, but keep that in mind. Yes, ma'am.
Just looking at the packet that we got here tonight, so just so people understand, the last couple pages, roughly based on 2018, Atkinson contributed 13.6 million, Danville contributed about 8.8 million, Plastow contributed 17.1 million, Sandown contributed 13.9 million.
Thank you. Yes, sir, on the amendment.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to move the article on the amendment and take a vote on it.
We have a motion to move the amendment. I think we've had a lot of discussion on it.
Second.
We have a second to move the amendment. Any all in favor of moving the amendment?
Could you read it again?
I'll read it. I don't understand it, but I'll read it again. Yes. Can the second, we had many seconds. Mr. Gurn seconded. The amendment. Shall the residents of the TRSD direct the TRSB to use weighted voting in all votes, including the organization of the school board and selection of officers? Each town will be entitled to one vote per school board rep for every increment of $1 million of contribution to the district raised by their town. Any remaining financial contribution from each town shall count as 1/10 of one vote for every $100,000 increment. Contribution shall be based on the prior year's financial contribution by each town directly to the district. The school board members present at a school board meeting shall be entitled to cast the entire number of votes assigned to their town, provided that each representative present shall be entitled to a proportionate share of the total to be cast. That's the amendment. It's seconded. All in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Nay. Jack, your amendment fails. That reverts us back to Article 13 as written. Jim?
She was
Oh,
first.
she had an amendment. That's right.
So we're back to the original article.
Original
13?
article, correct.
Okay. I'd like to amend this article to add, this article is advisory only and non-binding.
What's that?
She wants to add this article is advisory only and non-binding.
I'll second.
So we have a second by Kim. And she probably has it in writing by now, right?
I do. Yeah,
The amendment made and seconded is to add this article is advisory only and non-binding. Any discussion on that amendment? No. All in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? The ayes have it. So now on the article as amended. Any discussion on the article as amended? Yes, ma'am.
Louise Pajak, Sandown. If warrant article ... passes, what is the ...
I have no idea, Louise, but we
Yes.
can ask Jack.
I
You
think
can
somebody
answer
knows.
that?
That's because he had petitioned another warrant article after this that was not allowed to be put on the ballot because it didn't have the requisite number of signatures.
Yes, Jim.
Mr. Moderator, if it pleases the people, I'd like to make another amendment to kind of clean it up a little. Replace the entire article with the following. Shall the Timberlane Regional School Board study whether to use weighted voting in its business proceedings? Question mark. The subject stays the same, so it doesn't violate RSA 40. Shall the Timberlane Regional School Board study whether to use weighted voting in its business proceedings?
Jim, could you have that in writing with your name on it? He's writing that. Basically, he wants to change this to a study instead of saying it's non-binding. He wants to amend the article to make it a study, to change Article 2 of the Articles of Agreement regarding weighted voting, to study it.
I like it.
Are you standing up to second that, Jack? You standing up to second that?
Can I do that?
I don't know, I'm asking, because he hasn't had a second yet.
Oh, he doesn't? Yeah, I'll second it.
Stephen Doobie second.
I
Okay,
thought
we got
that
a
was
bunch
my
of
second.
seconds.
Yeah, that's good.
But since you're standing there, Jack, I'll recognize you for the second.
All right, I thought a little-
Speaking on the amendment,
Yeah, I
Jack.
thought a little levity would be nice. Look, the first thing we got to do is get $30,000 for legal fees if we're going to study this, right? Kidding. You know what? It doesn't hurt. Like I said, I think I made my point here tonight. I think that I do believe in fairness and proportionality, and I also believe that we're one team. So I really, whatever way this body decides they want to go with it. But I appreciate Mr. Garrity wanting to do. We did hear from a couple of the board and committee members that maybe more research would be deemed to look into the fact that we haven't reallocated the, what was it, 1977 was the last time we looked at this was apportioned. So maybe it makes sense that after 60 years, we look at it, because clearly some of the dynamics have changed.
Thank you, Jack. So on the motion, again, the motion is, shall the Timberlane Regional School Board study whether to use weighted voting in its business proceeding? Any further yes, sir.
I'm in favor of the amendment, but my only question would be, earlier this evening, we had another petition warrant article where we were kind of looking to change the substance. The petitioners of this warrant article didn't sign a petition for a study. They signed a petition to change Article 2 of the Articles of Agreement. What implication does that have? I'm in favor of the amendment. I'm just afraid of what implication it has with the petitioners.
Yeah, I can.
If we can ask Mr. O'Shaughnessy, or maybe
I can answer
you want
that.
to speak to that?
Yeah, once a petition warrant article is presented to the select board, to the board, it becomes the board's property. Once it's sent out to the voters, it becomes the voters' property. That's us, the legislative body. We can do anything we want with it according to the law. So the subject matter hasn't changed. The wording has, and that's legal. Yeah.
Any others? Someone here had their hand up? No? I don't see anybody at the mic, so all those in favor of the amendment to change this to a study signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Now I believe we'll revert back to the last article.
How about a motion to limit reconsideration?
I hear a motion to limit reconsideration of
Yes.
Article 13.
On 13.
13. Seconded by Mr. Michael Muscola. Seconded by Mr. Gurn. Motion to limit reconsideration of 13. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstains, the ayes have it. Reverting back to Article 11.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to offer an amendment to Article 11.
Yes.
I'd like to add 2 words.
Well,
to it.
if you could wait 1 second, I
Sorry.
need to refresh my memory. I thought we had an amendment by Mr. Boyle, and I can't remember if we acted on that or we postponed it to let Mr. O'Shaughnessy look at that amendment. That was the non-passage of the article.
You postponed
We voted on that? I thought we tabled that, so we haven't voted on that. Is that my recollection?
I thought the Attorney O'Shaughnessy said it was not a valid amendment.
He was doing some research, and before you jumped up and said you wanted to make an amendment, he did suggest to me during the interim, I won't say better, but a different amendment. But
Peter
that
and
would-
I have connected on that as well. I think the body needs to act on Mr. Boyle's amendment
First.
Get that out of the way one way or another.
I'll withdraw it.
Withdraw.
I'll withdraw the amendment. Second.
Did you make the second? Withdrew?
Yep, Phil.
So Mr. Boyle and his second is withdrawing his amendment to Article 11. Oh, you had Mr. Sapia as the second? Mr. Sapia has indicated he will withdraw his second. So we don't have that motion. And Peter, might you be making a motion?
There's a possibility of this.
I wonder if it'll look like the one I got.
I hope it does. To add 2 words to the Article 11, right after the word and, or the words and appropriating, add the 2 words and additional, and then it goes on to $460,303 through taxation. I have it in writing and signed.
Thank you, Peter. So the motion is to, before the $460,303, to add 2 words, and additional. So it will read, by raising and appropriating an additional $460,303 through taxation. Do we have a second on Peter's amendment? Mr. Sapia seconded it. Discussion on your amendment, Peter?
I believe it cleans the amendment up. I'm good with it.
Thank you. Any more discussion on that as amended? On the amendment.
Jimmy Ward Atkinson, but it still says fully fund, right? And saying an additional would fully fund?
It says fully fund and it says an additional.
So then
Again,
that
only
implies-
if the budget fails.
So that implies that it isn't, but it is, right?
Ms. Paycheck?
Mr. O'Shaughnessy, are you satisfied that this passes muster?
It's as good as it's going to get, and at least if I have to argue with the DRA or I have to argue to a judge, it gives me some
Leverage.
Some leverage, plus the meeting minutes will reflect
The turmoil?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Exactly. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Yes, Jim.
Hi, Jim Garrity from Atkinson. So does that mean if the real budget doesn't pass and the default budget is the default budget, which has, I don't know how much money is in transportation, and then this passes, so it'd be default budget, whatever that is, plus 460,000, is that a lot more than what's in the regular budget?
Yes, it's $460,000.
Mr. Boyle said yes. Yes, ma'am.
The proposed budget and the default budget for transportation are the same.
I'd like to actually say that the budget and the default budget are the same today, but two and a half, 3 weeks ago, they weren't the same. And this is a hedge that the school board makes additional changes between now and when the ballot's printed.
Mr. Collins?
Yeah, Rob Collins, Danville, thank you. Just wanted to reiterate that point that the default budget as it appears tonight can change. And it might. The board has until, I believe, February 25th to make changes if they see fit. So they may say tonight that it's fully funded in the transportation line. That doesn't mean it will be when you vote on it.
Discussion on the amendment to adding an additional.
Kathy Slade Plastow, I want to make a comment on that. I think the way that would, with this amendment, that would say or imply that it is not fully funded by the default. We're being told now the wording would be a hedge against the board reducing that. I don't see that happening. I think it's irrelevant and erroneous, and I think it goes in front of the voters this way, making it look like the board did not fund transportation when they did.
I thought he was going to go with the mic, so I was waiting. Mr. Boyle? Yes, sir.
Dave Knight in Danville. I'm concerned that when the voters look at the combination of the operating budget and the default budget and the difference in costs there, and they see the words "not fully funded," and with all of the comments that have been on Facebook, et cetera, lately, leading the public to believe that the school board is in some major mystery thing of decreasing budgets, that the voters are going to say, well, we better do with the operating budget, period, because by the time we get onto a default, and by the time we get done adding warrant articles, they're the same. I think that this messes with the mindset of the voters, that they don't know what's going on, and we're losing trust in our boards. I would vote against this. I believe we have another amendment that gets rid of all of the money issues, gets rid of all the lawyer, court, and judge and DRA issues, and if we would let this one fail, we'll give you another amendment that gets rid of all the problems.
Speaker on this table?
Jim, I know adding the two words an additional, but if we reduce the money from 483 down to 0 at that point? I'm sorry. What's that? It's late. By adding the "and additional," I definitely see the point of now we're putting that 483 again on top of what we already have. But if we reduce the amount down to 0, and stop. If we reduce the amount down to 0 and we have the "and additional," then we're not adding anything above and beyond. So does that help the argument and allay the fear of adding additional 483 onto a budget?
Mr. Bealow?
I believe that changes the intent dramatically.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, Mr. Boyle.
I think we should
On
get
the
rid
amendment.
On the amendment. And the amendment is?
Adding an additional in front of 46303.
Okay, I'm against the amendment, and I just think we should get rid of the words "fully funded." It's confusing.
I can
I think we
see
should
the
get rid of the
comments
words
how
fully
people
funded.
thinks it's,
It already is fully funded.
any more discussion on adding those two words, "and additional," to the posted Article 11? That's what we're talking about, adding "and additional" in front of 46303. I don't see anybody at the mic, so all in favor of that amendment to add additional, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. The nays win, have it. So that amendment is defeated. Jim, you have another amendment?
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to make an amendment on Article 11. The subject matter stays the same, transportation costs. Replace the entire wording of the current article with the following. Quote, shall the district encourage the Timberlane Regional School Board to fund transportation costs to meet the needs of the school district? Period. I'm sorry, question mark. That's it. It does not take, remember the RSA says you can't change the subject matter of a warrant article. It says nothing about intent, it just says subject matter. So the subject matter is still the same, transportation costs. If the folks vote no, then they don't encourage you to do it. If they vote yes, they do encourage you. The net result is there's no budgetary impact, one way or the other.
I'll second that.
So let me read the motion which was seconded. Replace Article 11 in its entirety with, shall the district encourage the Timberlane Regional School District School Board to fund transportation costs to meet the needs of the school district? On the amendment, Peter?
I'd like Attorney O'Shaughnessy to weigh in on that.
The courts have interpreted the authority of the legislative body to amend warrant articles to be fairly liberal. So as long as you're not changing the subject matter, you can do it. And I tend to interpret them liberally, and I think the subject matter is, is it TRSD transportation contracts, or is it the funding of TRSD transportation contracts? I tend to think it's allowable. It's pushing the limits a little bit, but that's my viewpoint.
Yes, sir.
Hi. Yes, a question through you, moderator, to the finance director, Jeff, because I think everyone here wants to fully fund transportation. Definition of what fully fund means may change, and I think a lot of the public may not have had the luxury of hearing some of the previous conversations that led up to this. So if you can, Jeff, could you tell us what your latest estimate of cost for transportation is next year, and what the difference is in the default and proposed budget and your number? In other words, how short or how much surplus is there?
Yes, sir.
I believe we're pretty close on both numbers at this point, between the default budget and the operating budget. I can get an exact number for you.
Cam?
Well, right now, the current default budget and the proposed budget are the same numbers. I can't speak to the fact that it's not a little underfunded or overfunded, because the business administrator did put out at least one other default budget that had a different number.
Mr. Knight?
Because the business, and sorry, just so people are aware, the business administrator has distributed 2 default budgets to this board with significantly different amounts.
Mr. Moderator, the purpose of this amendment is strictly to try to get the district out of the financial mess that was caused by the warrant article to start with. We trust the boards to do what they've been trying to do, the budget committee to do the work they were doing, the school board to do the default budget, and I'd like to move the question.
Motion to move the question, seconded by Mrs. You raised
I'll
your
second
hand?
that.
Seconded by Mr. Mascola. All in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. So the Article 11 as amended can vote on the amendment. So all in favor of the amendment as proposed by Mr. Garrity signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
There we go.
So any further discussion on the
I'd like to-
Article 11?
I'd like to call the question. Move it.
No, motion to limit reconsideration.
No, it's moved to the floor. You gotta.
Is that a motion to limit reconsideration?
Pardon?
Are you making a motion to limit?
I'm making a motion to move the question to the ballot.
Now we're limiting reconsideration.
We haven't voted on it.
It's been moved. It's been moved. You gotta restrict reconsideration.
Restrict reconsideration, please.
For the amendment or for the article?
Mr. Moderator.
Yeah, I lost track of where
Mr.
we are.
Moderator.
Yes, Mr.
So,
Muscola.
let me just back up. So we are done voting on that motion, is that correct?
On the motion was done. The article as amended, we could have further discussion on it, or you could move that, but we could not have any. So on the article as amended,
Where are we?
we're on Mr. Garrity's article, basically.
Okay, I would like to propose an amendment to that article that I hope will fix the problem with the zero difference.
There's no money in it.
Oh, so we have
Took
amended
the
it
money
since
out.
there's no money on it. Okay, very good.
No money anymore.
Now I'd like to make a motion to limit reconsideration.
We
Oh,
haven't
I'm sorry,
voted
sorry.
on it, so we moved his question. So the question is vote on Jim's article to amend, correct? Okay, so now no more discussion. Nobody's at the microphone on the amended article, so I'm going to call the amended article will appear on the ballot as amended. And now we have a motion from Mr. Mascola, I believe, to limit reconsideration, seconded by Sue. On limiting reconsideration, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. That is completing the warrant articles. I'm told to announce, school board will meet in the library following this session to take recommendation action on the warrant. The budget committee will meet in room 506 following this session to take recommendation actions on the warrant and conduct other business. Remember, March 12th, 2019, at your respective places is the vote on the ballot. Thank you for your attention and cooperation this evening. Have a safe trip home. I declare this meeting adjourned.